Once mom gets discharged, I'm counting on you to take care of her. What? You're going to be the one taking care of her? It's obvious we're family. He threatened me with divorce papers when I refused to take care of my mother-in-law. Do you want to be a poor single mom? If you don't, then just do as you're told. I can't take it anymore. I'm so done with this life. Just watch it. I'll make you regret this for sure. My name is Catherine. I'm 43. I live with my husband, Bob, and our high school-aged daughter, Emma. We get by on Bob's salary and the part-time work I do to support our family. We're not rich by any means, but we have a reasonably good life. Then one day, the worst thing happened. Catherine, it looks like mom has collapsed and has been taken to the hospital. Ah, your mom. My mother-in-law lies alone at home, but she's spry for her age. Apparently, she hurt her back in an accident while she was out shopping and now has to stay in the hospital for a while. Anyway, it's good that her life's not in danger. I'll go check on her at the hospital tomorrow. All right, take care. Aren't you coming? Huh? Why would I? Right, okay, I'll go alone. Please send my regards to your mom. Why? I don't visit my mother-in-law in the hospital. That's because I've cut ties with her. I've been married to Bob for 20 years. Since the beginning, my mother-in-law has detested me and has gone out of her way to make life difficult. You're really inefficient, aren't you, Catherine? You're not suitable for my son. I wish he had a better wife. I never imagined you'd be this useless, enduring the continuous verbal abuse from my mother-in-law that wore down my spirit. Whatever I did, it was always, father-in-law is useless, not good enough. Poor Bob. And so on. I was met with complaints every time we met. But I held on as long as I could because she was Bob's mother, whom I love. However, even after my daughter Emma was born, the mother-in-law's harsh words did not stop. On the contrary, she started finding fault with Emma as well. Just great, the long-awaited grandchild is a girl. She can't carry on the family name. She's of no use. If it's a girl, she should just at least be pretty. Who on earth does she take after? Amidst the difficult days, the worst situation that finally decided the end of our relationship occurred one day when my mother-in-law was unusually relaxed at our house. My daughter ran up to her with a picture book. "Granny, can you read this?" The moment Emma handed over the book, mother-in-law knocked it down and hurled at Emma, "Don't touch me with your dirty hands. I don't need an unattractive grandchild like you." Emma was startled by her grandmother's loud voice and began to cry. "Granny's scary." I must have been very sad. She was sobbing, and it hurt me to see her like that. Even yelling at my young daughter, I had reached my limit. "Hey, mother-in-law, what do you think you're doing?" I rushed over, but my mother-in-law showed no signs of remorse. Rather, she snapped, "It's your daughter's fault." "You've got to be kidding. I saw what you did. You knocked Emma's book out of her hand, didn't you? Trying to touch me with her dirty hands?" "Dirty hands? Can you say that? If you're going to do this to my daughter, don't come to our house anymore. They'll get cheeky with me. I don't care about you all. Why did you come to see Bob? This is also the house of me and Emma. Stop making silly excuses." In this way, my mother-in-law got into a big argument. Bob just stood there flustered, saying, "Hey, both of you, please stop," and didn't even warn his mother. She eventually went home grumbly all the while, but this proved to be the final straw. "I can't deal with your mother anymore. I'm fed up with you not defending me and Emma. Let's get divorced." When I said that, Bob started flustering again. "Hey, wait a minute. Even I find my mom tough to deal with. I just couldn't say anything because it was all so sudden. Today, I'm on your side, Catherine and Emma. People can say anything they want, but unless you act on it, it means nothing. Anyway, I can't take it anymore." Then my husband made a proposal. Okay, if you insist, Catherine, I don't mind if you cut ties with my mom. But please, I beg you, don't divorce me." I was torn. Would there be any benefits staying with such an unreliable husband in the future? Even if we cut ties, could I really avoid any interaction with my husband's mother forever? In the end, the reason I didn't go through with the divorce was because of our daughter. Our daughter adores her father, and he's a good and caring dad when he's with her. For our young daughter's sake, taking away her father right now wouldn't be right. So I decided to put the divorce on hold on the condition that I'd sever ties with my mother-in-law. But if anything else happens, I won't be lenient. I get it. I'll talk to my mom too. And with that, we reached an agreement, and I severed ties with my mother-in-law. I'll never let my daughter meet her grandmother again. That was a condition of our reconciliation. After 10 years, I can't forget what my mother-in-law did. As for visiting her, that's out of the question. Frankly, what happens to my mother-in-law isn't my business. A few days later, my husband came to me with a serious look on his face. Catherine, I need to talk. What is it? My husband looked awkward in response to my question. It's about my mom. Apparently, she'll need care after she's discharged. So what? It'll cost a lot if she goes to a facility, right? So I was thinking we should take care of her at home. Oh, that's impressive. Good luck. No, not me. You. What? What is he talking about? What? You're not seriously. You know that my mother's in a bad way, right, Catherine? He fell silent. The fact that he even suggests this was beyond my comprehension, to avoid any unwarranted expectations. I laid it out for him clearly. Look, I have a job too, and there's no way I can take on the responsibility of caring for your mother. But you're just working part-time, right? Surely you can find some time to take care of my mother. If that's what you think, then I'll just talk to my boss about switching to full-time. How about that? There was no point in dragging out the conversation. My feelings weren't going to change, and his timid demeanor was only annoying me. Although he looked like he wanted to say something, I naturally ignored him. The next day, it seemed he had spoken to his mother in the hospital as she called me. Excuse me, Catherine, what on earth are you thinking, refusing to care for your own mother-in-law? Yes, I refuse. Is there a problem? Her bizarre shriek came through the phone when faced with my calm response. For me, in my time, of course, I've cut you off. Remember, you're not even my mother-in-law to me anymore. I have no desire to help you with your care. What did you just say? How dare you? You and that errant child absolutely will not tolerate this refusal. To be honest, I considered just hanging up on her. It was a hassle. But if I didn't firmly reject her now, she'd probably just keep calling. I was prepared to settle this today, so I faced off with my mother-in-law. Do you remember why I cut you off in the first place, mother-in-law? What do you mean? Are you implying I've done something wrong? Have you already forgotten? Because of your insidious bullying and your appalling attitude towards my daughter. My husband also agreed to this decision. Goodbye. Wait, hold on. With no further discussion, I ended the call and promptly blocked her number. A few days later, Bob tried to bring up the topic again. Hey, about my mom. Again, I couldn't hide my irritation as I responded. Just so we're clear, I have absolutely no sympathy for my mother-in-law. No matter what happens to her, I've told you again and again that I won't provide care, right? Unexpectedly, her normally compliant husband shot back without hesitation. No, you're going to take care of my mom. Count on it. What? What does he mean? I've repeatedly stated that I don't want to have anything to do with my estranged mother-in-law. Is he like a chicken forgetting everything after taking 3 steps? Count on it is not the response I want. I said I will provide care, remember? I fired back defiantly, but my husband is different today. No matter how much I argue, he persistently pushes back. The heated argument I had with my mother-in-law on the phone days ago came to mind. Probably my mother-in-law had given him a piece of her mind afterward. Anyway, you're going to take care of my mom. It's obvious, isn't it? Former family, right? Remember, it was your idea to cut ties with your mother. That was then. My mom is now weak, and it's a different situation. She's not as energetic as she was after hospitalization. Yet you're still talking like a child. Childish? Me? The reason we're in this situation is because of that damn mother-in-law's childish harassment. And according to the conversation on the phone, your mother seemed pretty lively, didn't she? And even my husband repeatedly demands. I take care of his mother. I'm not going to back down. No matter what you say, I can't do what I can't do. And if it's that important to you, you can do it yourself. At that, her husband silently handed her a sheet of paper. What's this? Can't you tell? It's a divorce paper. To her shock, her husband had presented her with a completed divorce form. If you don't want to get divorced, take care of my mom. My silent disbelief only prompted my husband to pressure me more. You'd be in trouble if we divorce now, right? Emma will be a college student next year. You just a part-timer. Can't possibly survive if you divorce me now, right? If you don't like it, just do as you're told. The man who didn't consider my feelings, using our daughter as leverage to threaten me. I just can't continue being married to someone like this. It's impossible. The moment I was convinced of this, I felt my feelings for my husband quickly disappear. I'm going to end this. That's what I thought. Hey, are you even listening? You were all fired up just a moment ago. Now, a divorce is a reality. Are you scared? My husband looked down at me, laughing. My daughter came into the room, probably hearing us argue. Hey, I heard raised voices. What's going on? Then my husband started a tirade on Emma too. Oh, you're just in time. You'll be helping with your grandmother's care too. What? Why me? It's obvious, isn't it? She's your beloved grandma. You could at least help with the caregiving. I couldn't believe that they would impose my mother-in-law's care on my daughter without a second thought. I was so pissed off that I signed the divorce papers as fast as I could. What are you doing, Catherine? Isn't it obvious? I'm signing the divorce papers. I'll go submit them once I'm done. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to agree to the divorce so easily. Bob started to panic. Oh, hey, enough already. Did you even listen to me? You're going to be the one who's going to have a hard time if we get divorced. I don't care. Compared to staying involved with you, any hardship seems bearable. With divorce papers in hand, I began to prepare to leave. Then, perhaps numb to the situation, my husband took the final step. Are you sure about this? If we divorce, you'll have to give up Emma. I'm warning you, I'll get custody. You'll never see our daughter again. A husband who had no doubt in his mind that he's superior to his wife. Truly, how stupid can you be? Even if we get divorced, I will not give up my daughter. I will do whatever it takes to provide for my daughter at all costs. I will get custody of Emma. Shut up. Considering our financial situation, it's natural that I get hurt. You won't see our daughter again. Tough luck. At that moment, Emma, who had been quietly listening, chimed in. What are you talking about? I'm going with Mom. Ha! At Emma's words, Bob stood there dumbstruck. What are you saying? If you follow your mother, Catherine, you'll only face hardship. I don't care. It's better than being with you, Dad. I would never want to take care of Grandma. That's right. My daughter had not forgotten what my mother-in-law had done to her in the past. I really hate Grandma for bullying Mom. I'm also disgusted with you, Dad, for not helping my mom. I don't care about the money. I'm going to live with Mom. At my daughter's words, a surge of indescribable emotion welled up within me. I had hoped she would choose to come with me, but I never imagined that she thought it through so much. My husband, looking quite pathetic, started trying to persuade us to stay. Wait just a second. Wait, if you're gone, who's gonna take care of the house? Why don't you do it yourself, Dad? My daughter responded with a smirk. You can take care of Grandma and do all the housework all by yourself. That's impossible. I have a job, you know. So what? Mom has been working and doing house chores, and you want her to take care of Grandma on top of that, expecting others to do what you won't do yourself. That's ridiculous. My daughter gave my husband a thorough tongue lashing, leaving him completely stunned. Eventually, he resorted to his usual tactic of crying to win us over. Oh, why are you guys blaming me so much? I just asked for a little help with the caregiving. There was a time when we might have let it slide, but neither my daughter nor I have that kind of patience anymore. Looking at my crying husband, all we could do was shake our heads in disbelief. Let's go, Mom. Let's hurry up and pack our things. Right. My daughter and I each packed our belongings, took the divorce papers, and left the house. My husband kept crying, trying to stop us until the last moment, but of course, we ignored him completely. We submitted the divorce papers at the city hall, and our divorce was finalized. My daughter and I decided to live at my parents' house for a while. By the way, my family runs a flower shop. Right now, I am working part-time and helping out with the family's flower shop, trying to save money for my daughter's college tuition. My husband continued to contact me persistently even after that. Mom is throwing stuff at me. Help me. I can't handle it anymore on my own. Please come back. Since he was so annoying, I blocked his contact. Living with my ill-tempered mother-in-law every day must be quite a struggle, and it seems that my husband is having to care for her day and night without any sleep. Finally, my company has moved to shorter working hours, and my paycheck seems to be barely scraping by. If I had known it would come to this, I should have done whatever it took to put my mother-in-law into a facility. Well, it's too late to talk about what I should have done now. Besides, thanks to my husband making a fuss about caregiving, I'm able to spend these days with my daughter. I guess I should thank him for that bit. From now on, I want to live each day in cooperation with my cherished family.
The sound of shattering glass shattered the uneasy silence. How dare you, Elise? I spat, glaring at my sister-in-law. The fragments of the wine glass lay scattered on the hardwood floor, red liquid seeping into the grain. Elise's eyes widened in mock innocence. Marla, I didn't mean to upset you. She glanced around the room, playing to the captive audience of our family members. I was only teasing about you living off Derek's success. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat, Taft unwilling to get between us. My father, Harold, leaned forward, his weathered face etched with concern. Girls, please, can we not argue today? It's a family gathering, he said, voice strained. Exactly, Elise purred, straightening the silk scarf draped over her designer outfit. We're family. I was just making a little joke. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. Your jokes are never little, Elise. They're always thinly veiled insults meant to demean me. She laughed, a grating sound that made my skin crawl. Demean you? Marla, you're delusional. I'm merely stating facts. If it weren't for Derek's success, you'd be living in a cardboard box. Elise, Derek finally interjected, his face flushed, but I'd already heard enough. Keep your money and your malice, I hissed, standing abruptly from my chair. I'm done pretending we're one big happy family. Harold's eyes pleaded with me to stay, but I couldn't bear another moment under Elise's contemptuous gaze. I stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind me with a resounding thud. As I collapsed onto the guest bedroom bed, the muffled sounds of their bickering still reached my ears. Angry tears streamed down my face as I realized this family vacation was doomed from the start. How could we have let Elise's venom infect us like this? I stared at the suitcase I hadn't bothered unpacking, contemplating whether to start packing or wait for Harold to inevitably suggest we leave early, as he always did to keep the peace. A soft knock at the door interrupted my brooding. I wiped my eyes and called out, "Come in." Harold slipped inside, his expression pained. I'm so sorry, dear. I think it's best if we cut our trip short this year. The tension is just too much. I nodded, my throat too tight with unshed tears to speak. As Harold moved to comfort me with a warm hug, I couldn't help but wonder how much longer we could go on like this. Something had to give, before Elise's entitlement and cruelty tore our family apart completely. The drive back from the ill-fated family gathering was tense and silent. Harold kept his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw set in a grim line. I stared out the passenger window, numb from the confrontation with Elise. As we finally pulled into the driveway of our modest suburban home, Harold let out a heavy sigh. I'm so sorry you have to put up with her cruelty, dear. I shrugged, unable to find the words to express my hurt and frustration. Harold had apologized on Elise's behalf more times than I could count over the years. We entered the house, dropping our bags by the door. Harold immediately busied himself making tea, a nervous habit he'd developed since losing Mom to cancer 5 years ago. As I settled onto the living room couch, memories of my mother's final days came flooding back. Elise had visited exactly twice, both times leaving early with excuses about meetings or plans. Her indifference had stung. Harold brought me a steaming mug and took a seat across from me, wringing his hands. I'm afraid Elise may have been right about one thing. He met my eyes, guilt etched into his features. You have sacrificed so much for me since your mother passed. If it weren't for you, I raised a hand to stop him, shaking my head firmly. Don't even think that, Dad. I stayed to care for you because I wanted to, not out of obligation. Mom would have done the same. His eyes glistened with tears as he reached out to grasp my hand. You have always been the strong one, Marla, so much like your mother. Squeezing his hand in return, I pushed aside thoughts of Elise and her toxic behavior. This man was all that truly mattered to me now. Later that evening, as I prepared a simple dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, the doorbell rang. I frowned, setting down my knife as Harold moved to answer it. Derek? Elise? What are you doing here? I heard Harold ask in surprise. We felt just dreadful about how things ended today, Harold, came Elise's sickeningly sweet voice. I wanted to come apologize in person and make amends with my dear sister-in-law. I bristled at her words, quickly drying my hands and moving to the front hall. Elise stood holding a large shopping bag, her bleached smile blindingly false. Derek hovered behind her, shifting uncomfortably. "There's no need for that," I said evenly, meeting Elise's gaze. "I know exactly who and what you are. Nothing you say or do can change that." Elise's smile faltered before she regained her composure. Now, Marla, don't be so hostile. I come bearing gifts." She lifted the bag in offering. Rolling my eyes, I turned my back on her. "You can take your gifts and your empty apologies and go. We want nothing more to do with you. Perhaps you could give us a moment, dear?" Harold said in a placating tone. Before I could protest, he ushered Elise and a reluctant Derek into the living room, closing the door behind them. Fuming, I returned to the kitchen and the abandoned meal preparations. How dare she waltz in here with pretty words and wretched deception? I gripped the knife handle so tightly, my knuckles turned white, envisioning plunging it directly into Elise's cold black heart. No, I couldn't lose control like that. Mom had taught me to always take the high road, no matter how tempting vengeance might seem. But as the sounds of their hushed voices drifted through the closed door, I resolved that things could not continue this way. Elise's toxic negativity had cast its shadow over my life for far too long. One way or another, her hold over this family had to be broken, even if it meant extreme measures. A week after the disastrous family gathering, Harold insisted on hosting a dinner at our home for Elise. "It's the only way to mend fences and move forward as a family," he had said. I reluctantly agreed, if only to show I was taking the high road. The evening started off civilly enough. Elise complimented the simple but tasteful table setting I had arranged, though I suspected her words were laced with condescension. Derek remained largely silent, his head bowed as if trying to make himself invisible. "This chicken is quite good," Elise said after a few bites, a hint of surprise in her tone. I merely nodded, keeping my focus on serving Harold seconds. "Though I do prefer mine with a bit more seasoning." My grip tightened on the serving spoon as I sensed a barb coming. "I like to let the natural flavors shine through," I replied evenly. Elise smirked, taking a pointed sip of her wine. "Of course, simple is best when on a budget, I suppose." Derek shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "The meal is lovely, Marla. Thank you for having us." An awkward silence fell as I moved to clear Elise's empty plate. "Dessert, anyone?" I asked through gritted teeth. "Oh, I'd love something sweet," Elise gushed, patting her flat stomach. "Though I doubt you baked anything too decadent, we certainly wouldn't want me packing on any extra pounds before my next beach vacation." She let out a high-pitched giggle, as if we should all be in on the joke. Harold began to protest her rudeness, but I had reached my limit. "Tell me, Elise," I interrupted, slamming her plate down with a clatter. "Do you ever get tired of being such a vile, contemptuous witch?" Her eyes widened in mock offense. "I beg your pardon? Surely you're not referring to me." "Who else could I possibly mean?" I scoffed. "From the moment you married Derek, you've done nothing but insult me and belittle my life at every turn. I should have known you'd find a way to ruin even a simple family dinner." Now, Elise clucked, shaking her head. "Someone's awfully touchy tonight. I was only making a harmless little joke about rich food." "Your jokes are never harmless," I spat back. "They're always intended to remind me that without Derek's money, you see me as nothing but a penniless failure." Harold reached out pleadingly. "Marla, please calm down." But Elise just sneered, unable to resist twisting the knife. "Oh, stop being so sensitive. We all know the only reason you dote on dear old Dad is because you're hoping to be written into his will when he kicks the bucket." Her words hung in the air like a lead weight, stunning us all into silence. I stared at Elise, numb with fury, as tears sprang to Harold's eyes. Even Derek looked visibly shaken. In a split second, I made a decision I would never forget. Taking the plate still in my grasp, I flung it directly at Elise's smug face. It connected with a sickening crack, shattering into shards that peppered her designer dress and cut her flawless skin. Elise shrieked in pain and outrage, hands flying to her bloodied face as Derek leapt to her aid. Harold watched on in open-mouthed horror. Breathing hard, I loomed over them, seized with a dark calm. "Get out," I growled, pointing a shaking finger toward the door. "Get out of my house right now and never darken our doorstep again. Do you understand?" Elise continued to wail, muffled by Derek's jacket as he frantically bundled her toward the exit. Moments later, they were gone, the only sounds their retreating sobs and frenzied footfalls. Harold gaped at me. Marla, what have you done? I heard his voice crack. Sinking into the nearest chair, I buried my face in trembling hands. What had I done indeed? Tears rolled silently down my cheeks as I realized my path to vengeance had taken a dark, irrevocable turn. Against my better judgment, I agreed to accompany Harold and Derek on a family trip to a renowned national park a few weeks after the disastrous dinner incident. Harold had rationalized it as a chance to heal the fractures in our family. Deep down, I knew he just wanted to fulfill a promise to visit the park before his health further declined. The drive out was tense, with Derek breaking the silence only to make occasional small talk with Harold about park logistics. I stared stonily out the window, willing the miles to pass more quickly. Upon our arrival at the remote mountain lodge, Elise seemed to immediately sense the discord between us all. My, someone's got their grumpy pants on, she mocked with a saccharine smile as the valet unloaded our bags. I thought getting out in nature was supposed to lift one's spirits. Can we not do this here? Derek grumbled through gritted teeth. Elise merely pouted and looped her arm through his. I was just trying to lighten the mood, darling. Come, let's get unpacked and freshened up before dinner. She threw one last contemptuous look my way before sashaying off toward the lodge. I rolled my eyes and turned to help Harold with his suitcase, ignoring Derek's apologetic gaze. Dinner that evening set the tone for the days that followed. Elise couldn't resist taking petty jabs at everything from my modest attire to the healthy portions I encouraged Harold to eat. When she wasn't insulting me, she was monopolizing the conversations with endless chatter about the latest haute couture trends and reality TV gossip. It was as though she viewed the family vacation as an opportunity to assert her dominance over us all. One afternoon, as we set out on a short hiking trail, Elise hung back to walk beside me, ostensibly to admire the scenic views. After a few minutes of false pleasantries, her mask slipped. You know, I never expected you to actually come on this trip, she mused, eyeing me sidelong. I thought Derek might have more sense than to invite you along. I ground my teeth, refusing to give her the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. Why? Afraid my presence would spoil your little couple's retreat in paradise? She scoffed. Hardly. I just assumed you'd have more dignity than to keep hanging on like a barnacle, hoping to inherit Dad's estate or something? The memory of our dinner confrontation flooded back. I slowed my pace, clenching my fists. That's a disgusting assumption. Is it, though? She gave a derisive laugh. We both know you've dedicated your whole life to being Dad's caretaker. Isn't that why you've never had a real career? Or a serious relationship? Her words cut deep. I stopped walking, struggling to contain the fury building within me. At least I'm not a vapid, entitled gold digger like you, I spat. Elise raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow, wholly unaffected. Ooh, someone's showing their ugly side again. She moved in closer, her voice dropping to a menacing hiss. Listen here, Marla. The way I see it, you're just a sad, lonely burden that Dad and Derek are too weak to get rid of, but I'm not. So if I were you, I'd watch my back. Panic seized my chest as Elise pulled away and rejoined the rest of our group, the picture of innocence. I remained frozen in place, her poisonous words echoing through me. Was she capable of following through on such a vile threat? Of harming me to get me out of their lives? I shuddered, wrapping my arms tightly around myself. This family vacation needed to end soon, before Elise's malice escalated beyond repair. The morning after Elise's chilling threat on the hiking trail, I found myself unable to look her in the eye over our hotel breakfast. She, in turn, seemed to bask in the tension, chattering away to Derek as if nothing was amiss. Harold must have sensed my unease. As our food arrived, he leaned in close with a concerned expression. Everything all right, dear? You seem even more on edge than usual. I forced a tight smile. I'm fine, Dad. Just tired of the bickering, that's all. Before he could pry further, a commotion arose near the entrance to the dining room. Elise suddenly shrieked, leaping up from her chair. You! What are you doing here? She screeched, eyes wild with panic. We all turned to see a 30-ish man in a tattered jacket standing sheepishly near the hostess station. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on Elise. Elise? I didn't know you'd be here. He trailed off as Derek rose to his feet and moved protectively toward his wife. Who is this, Elise? Derek demanded, glaring at the disheveled stranger. Elise seemed to gather herself, smoothing her hair in a show of composure. "Just an ex-boyfriend with a restraining order," she said coldly. "The staff needs to call security immediately." The man's eyes widened. "No, wait, Elise, please, I only came to talk." "Talk about what?" Derek roared. "About how you're stalking my wife, violating a court order?" Several other diners now watched the scene with rapt attention. Elise clutched Derek's arm, crocodile tears welling up. "Please, get him away from me. I'm terrified." Security guards hurried over and began to escort the flustered ex-boyfriend out, as he protested they had it all wrong. I watched on in stunned silence, unsure what to make of the outburst. Elise sniffled dramatically and buried her face in Derek's chest. "I'm so sorry you all had to witness that. When will he just let me move on with my life?" Harold reached out to pat her hand. There, dear. The important thing is you're safe." But as I regarded Elise clinging to Derek's protective embrace, something in her demeanor didn't seem to ring true. Had that whole scene been a performance? A ploy to elicit pity and gain our sympathies? A dark thought crept into my mind. Perhaps the strange appearance of her ex was not as accidental as she claimed. Perhaps she had contrived the whole confrontation, knowing it would shock us and make her look like the wounded party, further alienating her from any suspicions or blame. In that moment, a cold chill ran down my spine. How much more was Elise capable of to get her way? What actions was she willing to take to secure our trust and affection? I decided then that I couldn't stay another night under the same roof as her. As staged as the morning's drama seemed, one thing had become abundantly clear. Elise was a manipulative, dangerous woman who would stop at nothing to fracture our family bonds for her own selfish gain. As Harold, Derek, and Elise continued to make a fuss over the security response, I rose quietly from my chair and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I needed to find a way to end this vacation immediately, before Elise's malice spun further out of control. After Elise's alarming confrontation with her supposed ex-boyfriend at breakfast, I wasted no time in searching her out alone. I found her in the hotel lobby, feigning distress as she recounted the incident to the concerned concierge. "Elise," I interrupted sharply. "A word?" She glanced up at me with disdain. "Can't you see I'm a bit occupied here? Why don't you run along and let the adults handle this?" Ignoring her jab, I pressed on. "We need to talk. Now." Elise rolled her eyes but begrudgingly excused herself to follow me outside onto the lodge's scenic back patio. A few other guests lounged nearby, sipping coffee and taking in the mountain vistas. "Well?" Elise snapped once we were out of earshot. "What's so urgent that you had to drag me away?" "I know that whole scene with your ex-boyfriend this morning was a setup," I said bluntly. "I'm not sure how or why, but you orchestrated that entire confrontation." Elise's features froze into an icy mask. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing? That was terribly traumatic for me." "Was it, though?" I pressed. "Because I didn't see any real fear or surprise in your eyes when that man appeared. If anything, you seemed almost prepared for it to happen." A muscle twitched in her jaw. "You've completely lost your mind, Marla. I'm a victim here, can't you see that?" "No, I don't see that," I said evenly. "What I see is you manipulating the situation and all of us to make yourself look like the poor, wounded wife in need of sympathy and protection, just like you always do." Elise's composure shattered. "You miserable wench," she hissed, moving in close with bared teeth. "Of course you'd never understand what it's like to be vulnerable as a woman. You're nothing but a jealous, pathetic old maid." I refused to back down. "Believe me, Elise, I understand exactly who and what you are. The time for your lies and deceptions is over." She let out a derisive laugh. "And just what do you plan to do about it? Turn my own husband against me with your wild, paranoid delusions?" "If that's what it takes," I said, my voice laced with steel. "Your hold over this family ends here." With that, I spun on my heel and marched back inside, leaving Elise to seethe alone in the fresh mountain air. I knew I needed to act fast before she could manipulate the situation even further. I tracked down Harold first, finding him back in the lobby looking confused and troubled. I took his arm firmly but gently. "Dad, we need to leave. Now." His brow furrowed. "But dear, what about the rest of our stay? We haven't even been here 2 days." "Trust me, we cannot stay another night under the same roof as Elise," I said, keeping my voice low. I'll explain everything once we're far away from here, but we have to go. Harold hesitated for a moment, then seemed to read the desperation in my eyes. He relented with a resigned sigh. All right, I'll go let Derek know we're checking out early. As he shuffled off to find his son-in-law, I moved to the front desk to arrange a hasty checkout. Within half an hour, our bags were loaded and we were speeding away down the winding mountain roads, leaving Elise and her web of deceit behind. The rage and disbelief on her face as we drove off without explanation was an image I would not soon forget. Finally, the tables had turned, and a small piece of my long-simmering revenge had been satisfied. As we raced homeward through the spectacular alpine scenery, a calmness settled over me. For once, standing up to Elise's malice had felt like a victory. But I knew this battle was far from over. She would not take our abrupt departure lightly. In the days to come, I was certain Elise would retaliate in full force, and I needed to be prepared to unravel her manipulations completely, no matter how extreme the measures. As predicted, Elise's wrath over our abrupt departure from the family vacation was swift and unrelenting. No sooner had we returned home than Derek showed up at our doorstep, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he stated flatly as I ushered him inside. Harold peered out from the living room, confused. "Derek, what's going on, son?" "I've just come from an argument with Elise," Derek said, running a hand through his hair. "She's absolutely beside herself, insisting you two abandoned her in the mountains without any explanation." He fixed me with an accusatory glare. "She said something about you making wild accusations against her, claiming you conspired to have her embarrassed in front of everyone." I refused to be cowed. "Derek, I know this is going to sound extreme, but I promise it's the truth. Your wife orchestrated that entire confrontation with her so-called ex-boyfriend at breakfast." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous. Why on earth would Elise manufacture something so upsetting?" "To manipulate us all into sympathizing with her, playing the victim," I pressed on. "She knew that if we saw her being abused or mistreated, it would gain our trust and make her seem more vulnerable." Derek opened his mouth as if to protest, but I held up a hand to stop him. "I know how it sounds, but please, hear me out. Look at her behavior. Really look at it. She tells a constant stream of lies and spins everything to make herself the center of attention, the wronged party. She practically thrives on your pity." I saw a glimmer of doubt spark in Derek's eyes as I laid it all out. "I can't prove what she did or how, but I know it in my gut. Elise engineered that scene with her ex to secure your loyalty and affection. She's been manipulating our entire family this whole time." Shaking his head slowly, Derek moved to sink into the nearest armchair, looking utterly defeated. "My God, what if you're right?" Harold sat down beside him, reaching out to grasp his shoulder. "Derek, I know my daughter may sound paranoid, but I've seen how Elise has treated her over the years. Perhaps it's time to consider the possibility that—" He was interrupted by the shrill ringing of the doorbell. I froze mid-sentence as Derek looked up, his face pale. "That'll be her. She's come for an explanation." As he moved to answer the door, I grabbed his arm fiercely. "No, don't let her in until you've heard the whole truth." He met my gaze, fear and uncertainty etched into his features. Then, with a curt nod, he pushed past me toward the foyer. "Go away, Elise," he bellowed through the closed door. "We're not having this discussion through a door." "Open up this instant, Derek." Elise's shrill voice reached my ears, dripping with venom. "You can't simply leave me alone up there with no way back. What were you thinking, abandoning me like that?" "We're not discussing this now," Derek replied, leaning against the door as if to physically barricade her out. "Go home and cool off. We'll talk when you're not hysterical." There was a beat of silence, then the most blood-curdling scream of rage erupted from the other side of the threshold. Elise unleashed a torrent of profanity and accusations, banging her fists against the heavy wooden door. It took all my resolve not to cower back as her wrath blasted through the hallway. Derek remained grim-faced and steadfast, waiting her out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard her high heels storming off, accompanied by a fresh volley of curses. Derek sagged against the door, his face crumpled with despair. Harold reached out to steady him. "Now, son, now you know the truth." I watched as Derek broke down, realization washing over him in waves. I moved to his side, enveloping him in a tight embrace as great heaving sobs racked his body. Elise's grip was broken, and the path to her ultimate downfall had been laid bare. In that moment, I felt an odd sense of resolution. My long quest for vengeance against the woman who had tormented me and poisoned our family had taken a dark, ugly turn. But finally, after so many years, justice was being served. As Harold joined us with tears in his eyes, I wondered how much further the ripples of retribution would spread before the storm finally passed. Elise's reckoning was only just beginning. In the weeks following Elise's explosive outburst on our doorstep, a palpable shift occurred within our family dynamics. Derek, finally forced to confront the ugly truth about his wife's manipulations, took decisive action. "I'm filing for divorce," he informed Harold and me one evening over a quiet dinner. "I can no longer ignore or excuse her vile behavior." Harold reached across the table to grasp his hand. "I'm so sorry it has come to this, son, but you have our full support." I simply nodded, a lump forming in my throat. While a dark part of me felt vindicated, the predominant emotion was a deep sorrow for Derek's pain. Elise didn't go quietly, of course. She stormed the house one final time, unleashing a torrent of accusations and threats. But this time, Derek stood firm. "Get out," he stated flatly. "The lawyers will handle the asset division, but I want you gone from my life immediately." Sputtering with outrage, Elise turned her vitriol on me. "This is all you're doing, you conniving bitch. You filled his head with lies to turn him against me." I refused to rise to her bait. "No one turned Derek against you but yourself, with your constant cruelty and deception. Now leave, and don't come back." As the divorce proceedings dragged on over the following months, Elise grew increasingly unhinged. She showed up to Derek's office shrieking about him destroying her life. She harassed Harold with late-night drunken voicemails pleading for his intervention. But through it all, we remained a united front, utterly unmoved by her desperate machinations. At long last, the divorce was finalized. Elise retained a sizable portion of Derek's assets, but had lost any remaining influence over our lives. After one last attempt at reconciliation was rebuffed, she finally disappeared, leaving only a scorched path of bitterness in her wake. A profound calmness settled over our home in the aftermath. Derek slowly regained his strength and self-assurance without Elise's constant belittling presence. Harold's health improved notably with the reduction of stress, and I found myself able to breathe fully for the first time in years. The ever-present shadow of Elise's malice finally lifted. One evening over a lively game of cards, Derek turned to me with an expression of utmost sincerity. "Marla, I owe you an immense apology for allowing Elise to treat you so abhorrently for all these years," he said, shame flickering in his eyes. "If it weren't for your bravery in exposing her manipulation and standing up to her, who knows how much longer I would have remained blind." I reached out to grasp his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You were deceived by someone you loved and trusted. I hold no ill will toward you, Derek." He managed a weak smile. "You've always been the strong one, just like Dad says, so selfless, caring for him as you do, despite Elise's years of abuse. I cannot even begin to make amends, but I want you to know how deeply I respect and admire you." Harold nodded in solemn agreement. "Your mother would be extremely proud of the woman you've become, dear." I felt tears prick my eyes, overcome with emotion at their words. So many years of hurt and anger seemed to melt away in that moment as our family bonds were reformed, stronger than ever before. In the days that followed, Derek departed to travel abroad while he reassessed his life and career. Harold and I fell into a renewed closeness in his absence, our relationship no longer clouded by Elise's toxic presence. So focused on repairing what she had fractured, we scarcely noticed when the dark specter of her name faded entirely from our conversations. It was over a relaxing cup of tea one afternoon that Harold brought up an idea that would change the course of the next chapter of our lives. "You know, with Derek's support, we could likely afford to purchase and renovate that vacant storefront downtown," he mused. "Turn it into a proper community center for all the local families in need." I felt a spark of inspiration ignite within me. "Dad, that's a wonderful idea. We could offer programs, classes, counseling services. It could become a real pillar in our town." He grasped my hand, his eyes alight. And just think, we'd get to build it together, side by side, a chance to create something positive out of all that ugliness. I squeezed his hand firmly, feeling a profound sense of purpose wash over me. Our path forward was clear, to uplift and support others in whatever form we could. The past would not define us. Only our resilient spirits and deep familial love would remain to guide us into a bright, new future. The moment I spotted Sophie at the airport, my heart sank. Dressed in her usual flamboyant style, she was impossible to miss. I approached her, my steps measured, my emotions a chaotic whirlwind. "Claire, fancy seeing you here," Sophie said, her voice dripping with feigned surprise. I forced a smile. "I wish you'd come to my wedding," I said, the sarcasm in my voice mirroring hers. The bitterness of the past was palpable between us. She cocked an eyebrow, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, Daniel and I are beyond such trivialities now. Daniel." Even his name ignited a fire in my chest. My husband, or rather ex-husband, now betrothed to my own sister. The irony was as painful as it was absurd. "You must be thrilled marrying a pilot," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Sophie always had a taste for luxury, and Daniel, with his charming pilot persona, fit her bill perfectly. Sophie laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "Thrilled is an understatement, Claire. We're planning a lavish wedding, something you never had, despite being with him first." Her words stung, but I refused to show it. I remembered the day I discovered their affair, the lies, the deceit. It was a wound that refused to heal. "I'm happy for you," I lied. "In fact, I came here to give you something." I extended my hand, holding an envelope. Sophie's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What's this?" "Just some crucial information I thought you should have," I said, masking the tremor in my voice. She snatched the envelope from my hand, her nails, sharp and manicured, briefly scratching my skin. I watched as she tore it open, her expression shifting from smugness to confusion, then to horror. Inside, I had placed a copy of a termination letter, Daniel's termination from his airline job, 2 months before she announced her pregnancy. He had been caught in a scandalous affair with a married flight attendant and had to pay a hefty settlement. Sophie's face paled. This must be a mistake." "No mistake," I said calmly. "You might want to discuss it with Daniel before making any lavish plans." Her hands trembled, the letter crumpling under her grip. "You're lying," she hissed. "Am I?" I turned to leave, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. "Good luck, Sophie." As I walked away, I didn't look back. The past was a place of betrayal and heartache, a place I no longer belonged to. Today, I was taking the first step towards something new, something mine. I sat in a quaint cafe, sipping my coffee as the memories flooded in. The day Sophie moved in with us, claiming it was just for a few weeks, marked the beginning of the end. Daniel had been enthusiastic, too enthusiastic about her staying. I brushed off my initial unease as sisterly concern. "How long do you plan to stay?" I had asked her, trying to mask my hesitation. "Just until I find a new place," Sophie had replied, her eyes avoiding mine. "You know how tough the market is." I had nodded, trying to be the supportive big sister. But weeks turned into months, and Sophie showed no intention of leaving. Daniel's attitude towards me changed during this time. Our conversations dwindled, our laughter ceased, and his late nights became more frequent. One evening, as I prepared dinner alone, I heard them laughing in the living room. The sound pierced through me. I peeked in to see them close, too close. My heart clenched, but I dismissed it as paranoia. "Dinner's ready," I called out, my voice feigning cheerfulness. They joined me at the table, but the air was thick with unspoken words. Sophie's glances at Daniel were not of a sister to a brother-in-law. They held something deeper, something forbidden. The following weeks were a blur of confusion and denial. I caught them whispering, sharing secretive smiles, and every innocent touch seemed laden with hidden meaning. My home, once a sanctuary of love and trust, became a stage for their deceit. "Is everything okay between us?" I finally confronted Daniel one night. "Of course," he replied too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" But his eyes, once warm and loving, were cold and distant. The truth finally came crashing down on a rainy evening. I returned home early from work to find them entwined on the couch, lost in a moment meant for lovers, not siblings. The scene before me was grotesque, a betrayal so profound it was almost surreal. I stood there, frozen, as the world I knew shattered around me. How could you?" My voice was a mere whisper, a broken sound from a broken heart. Sophie turned, her face void of remorse. It just happened, Claire. We didn't mean to hurt you. Daniel said nothing, his silence more painful than any words. I couldn't stay. I couldn't breathe. I left the house that night, my tears blending with the rain. The cafe's chime brought me back to the present. I realized how far I had come from that night of despair. The pain had forged me anew, stronger, and determined to claim back my life. Sophie and Daniel had taken everything from me, but I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of their karma, their poetic justice. In the weeks following my departure, I found myself adrift, a ghost haunting the fringes of the life I once knew. The city felt different, tainted by the betrayal that had upended my world. As I wandered the streets, my mind replayed the confrontation, the lies, and the heartache. One afternoon, I sat in a park, watching couples stroll by, their happiness a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. My phone rang, piercing the tranquility. It was Sophie. "Claire, we need to talk," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and discomfort. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, my words clipped. "It's about the apartment. Daniel and I decided to stay there." Her audacity left me speechless. My home, the sanctuary of my shattered marriage, was now their love nest. "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. "Why not? It's convenient, and besides, you left." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see my pain. "Do what you want. I won't be coming back." There was a pause, a hesitancy in her voice. We're also thinking of redecorating. Change the vibe, you know?" The idea of them erasing my presence, transforming my home into something unrecognizable, ignited a fire within me. "Fine, Sophie. Make it yours. I don't care anymore." I hung up, a plan forming in my mind. If Sophie wanted the apartment, she could have it, but it wouldn't be the paradise she envisioned. In the following days, I set my plan into motion. I contacted my lawyer, beginning the process of transferring the apartment solely into my name. It was a place of pain, but it was also my leverage. I then visited the apartment when I knew they wouldn't be home. Walking through the rooms, I felt like an intruder in my own life. The memories were suffocating, but I pushed through, planting subtle reminders of my presence. A photograph tucked in a drawer, a scarf left on a chair, small inconspicuous items that would remind them of me, of the life they destroyed. I also began to spread rumors, whispers of Daniel's infidelity, not just with Sophie, but with others. The seeds of doubt were easy to sow among our mutual friends and acquaintances. His reputation as a pilot and a faithful husband was already tarnished, and I simply fanned the flames. Sophie called me several times over the next few weeks, her voice increasingly agitated. "What are you doing, Claire? People are talking. They're saying things about Daniel." "People always talk, Sophie. Maybe they're just seeing the truth now. But it's affecting his job, his reputation. Consequences, Sophie. You both should have thought about that before." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the realization that their actions had repercussions. I hung up, a bitter satisfaction settling in my chest. My heart was still broken, but I was no longer powerless. The weeks turned into months, and the once sharp pain of betrayal gradually morphed into a smoldering ember of resentment. I had not seen Sophie or Daniel since the day I left the apartment, but their presence in my life was like a shadow, always lurking. Then, one chilly evening, as the city lights flickered to life, my phone rang. The screen flashed Sophie's name, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. I answered, my voice guarded. "Claire, we need to meet. It's important." Sophie's voice was urgent, laced with a nervous energy. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her at a small cafe the next day. As I sat waiting, my mind raced with possibilities. What could she possibly want after all this time? Sophie arrived, looking visibly anxious. She sat down, avoiding my gaze. "What is it, Sophie? Why did you want to see me?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm pregnant, Claire, with Daniel's child." The news hit me like a physical blow. The remnants of the life I once shared with Daniel, now irreversibly intertwined with Sophie's betrayal. "And you think I need to know this why?" My voice was cold, my defenses up. Sophie fidgeted with her napkin. Because he's planning to leave me, Claire. After everything, he's going to abandon me and the baby." The irony of her words was not lost on me. She had stolen my husband, destroyed our marriage, and now she was the victim? "So what do you want from me?" I asked, struggling to keep my composure. I don't know. Help? Advice? You were always the wise one. Her plea, so devoid of self-awareness, fueled my anger. You made your bed, Sophie? Now you have to lie in it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. But I thought he loved me, she whispered. That's the thing about deceit, Sophie. It never lasts. You and Daniel deserve each other. I stood up, ready to leave this sordid chapter behind. But before I walked away, I turned back to her. One more thing, Sophie. Remember the apartment? It's mine. You have until the end of the month to leave. Her eyes widened in shock. You can't do that. Oh, but I can. And I will. I left the cafe, the cold air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere. Sophie's tears and pleas were a distant echo as I walked away. This was not just revenge. It was justice. Months passed, and the autumn leaves began to fall, painting the city in shades of orange and brown. I found solace in my art studio, a place that had become my refuge, a symbol of my newfound independence. Here, amidst the canvas and paint, I was free from the shadows of my past. One late afternoon, as I was finishing a painting, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from a friend who had been a mutual acquaintance of Daniel, Sophie, and me. The message was brief but telling. Have you heard about Daniel and Sophie? Curiosity piqued. I called her immediately. Claire, it's a mess, she began, her voice a mix of shock and gossip. Daniel lost his job, some scandal at the airline, and now, with Sophie's baby on the way, they're struggling. The news, though expected, brought a complex mix of emotions. There was no joy in their suffering, but there was a sense of poetic justice. And Sophie? I asked, trying to sound indifferent. She's desperate. Moving back with her parents, I heard. Daniel's nowhere to be seen. It's like he's vanished. The call ended, leaving me with a bittersweet satisfaction. The deceitful house of cards they had built was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. As days turned into weeks, more tidbits of their downfall reached me. Sophie, once so full of life and charm, was now a shadow of her former self, burdened by the reality of single motherhood and abandoned by the man she had betrayed me for. One dreary evening, as I closed my studio, I saw Sophie standing outside, her figure frail and defeated. I hesitated, but something in her eyes drew me out. Claire, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I need your help. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman broken by her own choices. Why should I help you, Sophie? After everything? I know I don't deserve it, she said, her eyes brimming with tears, but I have nowhere else to go. The baby, Her voice trailed off, choked by sobs. I could have walked away, left her to face the consequences of her actions. But as I stood there, something shifted within me. Sophie, I can't undo the past. But I can offer you this, I said, taking a deep breath. Come work at the studio. It's not much, but it's a start. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Why? Why would you do this? Not for you, I said firmly. For the child. No child should suffer for the sins of their parents. Sophie nodded, a silent agreement sealed between us. This was not forgiveness, nor was it reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement of the complex tapestry of human emotions. Hate, love, betrayal, and perhaps a glimmer of compassion. As I locked the studio door and walked away, I realized that this was my closure. I had risen from the ashes of my past, not unscathed, but stronger and more resilient. And in this strength, I had found the capacity to be kind, even to those who had wronged me. The seasons changed, and with them, life at the studio evolved. Sophie worked diligently, a stark contrast to the carefree, irresponsible sister I once knew. The studio became a place of silent understanding, a shared space where the past was acknowledged but not discussed. One brisk morning, as I was arranging a new art exhibition, an unexpected visitor walked in. It was Daniel, looking older and wearied by life's recent trials. His eyes found mine, and for a moment time stood still. Claire, he began, his voice tinged with regret. I need to talk to you. I nodded, leading him to a quiet corner of the studio. The air was heavy with unspoken words, years of pain and betrayal hanging between us. I came to apologize, Daniel said, his eyes not meeting mine. For everything. I was a fool, and I hurt you in the worst possible way. I listened, my heart a stoic observer. His apology, though sincere, could not undo the past. Why now, Daniel? I asked, my voice steady. I've lost everything, Claire. My job, my dignity, and now even Sophie is moving on. I've had a lot of time to think, to realize the magnitude of my mistakes. I studied him, seeing the man I once loved, now broken by his own actions. Your apology won't change what happened, I said calmly. But I accept it. Not for you, but for myself. I've moved on, Daniel. I suggest you do the same. He nodded, a silent acceptance of my words. As he turned to leave, he paused. You're a remarkable woman, Claire. I'm sorry I didn't see that before. I watched him leave, feeling a chapter of my life finally closing. In his departure, I found a sense of peace, a confirmation that I had made the right choices. The days that followed were a blend of routine and creativity. The studio thrived, and with each passing day, Sophie became more of a colleague than the sister who had betrayed me. We were two individuals, connected by a past that had shaped our present. As I stood in the studio one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I reflected on my journey. From the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak, I had risen, stronger and more resilient. I had sought revenge, but in the end I found something more powerful: forgiveness and the ability to move forward. Life had thrown its worst at me, but I had emerged victorious, not through vengeance, but through the strength of my spirit. Sophie walked in, her son cradled in her arms. She smiled at me, a wordless gratitude for the second chance I had given her. I returned her smile, realizing that this was my redemption, my renewal. In forgiving, I had set myself free, and in that freedom I found my true happiness. The story of Claire Richardson, once marred by deceit and betrayal, was now a tale of triumph, a testament to the enduring strength of the human heart. I'm Elena, 33 years old, married to Marcus, my college sweetheart. We live a simple life, both working as accountants in the city. Today was one of those rare quiet days at home. No emails, no calls, just the two of us curled up on the couch with a couple of lazy sandwiches and the TV murmuring in the background. Then the doorbell rang, slicing through our quiet afternoon. Marcus gave me a surprised look, shrugged, and went to answer. My heart sank when I heard that all-too-familiar voice complaining about the stairs. Marcus reappeared in the living room with two unwelcome guests, his parents. Out of nowhere, they had decided to visit. Mrs. Harper, my mother-in-law, descended on our home like a hawk, her eyes quick to judge my casual attire. Elena, you're lazing around in sweats? Marcus, didn't I teach you any better? This is not how we take care of our home. I felt my cheeks warm up as I stood up, forcing a smile. Hi, Mrs. Harper. Mr. Harper, it's nice to see you. Marcus grimaced, mouthing a silent apology. I knew none was needed. It's not like he could have stopped her. Our once peaceful abode now became Mrs. Harper's stage. She sat herself down without waiting for an invitation, talking about how good it could be for them to move in. She probably loved the idea of having someone to order around full-time, and that someone was me. I wanted to protest, to stand up and say no, but I glanced at Marcus and hesitated. He was an only child, and I knew he'd feel torn. The thought of living with Mrs. Harper, though, under that constant scrutiny, it was terrifying. The visits were bad enough. They've always been too frequent and too long, filled with her snide remarks about how I kept house or my cooking. Marcus tried to make light of it, but I knew him well enough to see that he was just trying to keep the peace. He'd never dare stand up to his mother, and that left me to fend for myself. As Mrs. Harper rattled on about the potential joys of cohabitation, painting a picture of family bliss, I quietly seethed. Marcus was a good man, but when it came to his mother, he was powerless. Or maybe he just didn't want to see how much it was affecting me. I needed a plan, a way to protect the life I had built with Marcus. The idea of them living with us, of her being around all the time, was too much. I couldn't let it happen. I would not let it happen. But how? Whatever I decided, I knew I couldn't do it alone. The time had come for a serious talk with Marcus, a reality check about his parents, especially his mom, and the toll they were taking on our lives. The rest of the afternoon blurred into an anxious haze as I plotted my next move. It was a small apartment, comfortable for two, a sanctuary for our love. Mrs. Harper's grand plans threatened that peace, and I knew that something had to give. Her casual visit had sparked a silent vow within me. I would fight for our home, our life, and most of all, for my independence. This surprise attack on my quiet day was going to be the last. As the Harpers finally left, a sense of dread lingered in their wake. The stillness of the apartment now echoed with the unsaid, the tension hanging heavy. I managed a half-hearted wave goodbye, then slumped back onto the couch, drained and on edge. Marcus sat beside me, a wrinkle of concern etched across his forehead. "Elena, I'm sorry," he began, his voice low, knowing that his apology was as empty as the pit in my stomach. "They just showed up, and I didn't know how to turn them away." I looked at him, wishing I could ease his guilt, but I had my own bubbling resentment to address. "If your mom moves in—" I paused, the words "I won't stay" perched on the tip of my tongue. But I couldn't say them. Not yet. We spent the evening in a quiet standoff, the unsaid building a wall between us. I pondered how we had reached this point. There was a time when visits to the Harper household were occasional and cordial, but after the wedding, their true nature surfaced. The bonds of marriage had apparently tightened expectations, pulling me into a role that I never auditioned for, part housemaid, part trophy daughter-in-law. The next day was Sunday, typically a day we locked the world out and basked in each other's company. Yet the conversation from the day before loomed like dark clouds on a clear sky. Over breakfast, I broke the silence with a determination hard-forged from countless slights and criticisms. "Marcus, we need to talk about your parents," I said, setting my cup down with deliberate care. "Especially about your mom's idea of moving in with us." He cringed at the mention, but nodded and listened. It was one of the qualities that had drawn me to him, the willingness to listen even when the words were hard to swallow. "They are your parents, and I respect that. But the way your mom treats me, it's too much. Her surprise visit yesterday was the tipping point. I can't have that be my life, Marcus. Our life." Marcus took a deep breath, meeting my gaze. "I know she can be difficult. I'm so used to her ways that I forget it's not normal. I don't want you to be unhappy, Elena. I love you." "Then help me fix this." My voice cracked a little, but my resolve stood strong. "Your mother can't stay here. We can't live that way." Marcus reached for my hand, his thumb brushing the back of it in a soothing motion. "I'll talk to them," he said after a long pause. "I'll make sure she understands that this is our home, our rules." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The first step was taken, a small victory in what I anticipated would be a lengthy battle. But that glimpse of defiance in Marcus, the subtle stiffening of his spine as he spoke, it gave me hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could stand together against the tide. With his words came the promise of support, but also the understanding of the challenge that lay ahead. Confronting Mrs. Harper would require a strength neither of us knew we possessed. The battle lines, however invisible, had been drawn. The next move was ours to make, and I could only hope it would lead us towards a future where our home was finally ours again. The days that followed were awkward and rife with tension. Mrs. Harper did not call or drop by, and I wondered if perhaps Marcus had spoken to her. But he was tight-lipped about it all, retreating into a somber shell whenever I broached the subject. While Marcus was at work one Tuesday, I stared at the walls of our small apartment, the quiet a stark contrast to the busy fury that Mrs. Harper often brought into our lives. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision, one that I hoped would bring some semblance of freedom and respect. We had to set firmer boundaries, and if Marcus couldn't do it, then it was up to me to draw the line. That evening, armed with resolve and a simmering pot of courage, I waited for Marcus to return. He trudged through the door, the weight of the day creased into his suit and the lines around his eyes. I helped him off with his jacket and led him to the couch. "Marcus, we need to talk." "Seriously," he nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, talk to me." "It's your parents, Marcus, specifically your mom," I started, feeling my pulse quicken. "I feel trapped. I feel like I'm constantly being judged and evaluated, like I'm not a person to her, but just an extension of you that needs to be shaped and molded." He looked pained, his eyes conflicted as they met mine. "Elena, they're from a different generation. Mom, it's her way of showing care, of being involved. I told you, I've talked to her. I've asked her to dial it back." "Marcus, it's not enough to ask her to dial it back. We need a clear break from this suffocating control. I need you to understand how this affects me. It's not about being involved. It's about controlling every aspect of our lives down to when I can have a peaceful day at home." The words came flooding out, propelled by pent-up emotions and sleepless nights. Marcus sat silent for a good minute, his brow furrowed. Then he slowly reached out, taking my hands in his. "I don't want to lose you over this, Elena. You mean more to me than any old tradition or expectation my parents might hold." I clung to his words, a lifeline amidst the swirling current of my worries. "What do we do then? How do we put an end to this? Because, Marcus, I can't go on like this. I'm reaching my breaking point." Marcus stood up, pacing the room. I think we need a more drastic change. Maybe it's time for us to find our own place. I mean, a house, somewhere your mom can't just show up." My heart skipped, even as my mind raced to keep up with the gravity of his suggestion. "But we can't afford a house right now, not in the city," I interjected, the practical side of me overriding the momentary hope. "We'll make it work. We'll figure it out, just like we have with everything else," Marcus said, more to himself than to me. His determination stirred something within me, an almost forgotten sense of courage and optimism. Maybe there was a way out of this after all, a way to start afresh in our own space, on our own terms. As the evening grew late with discussions and what-ifs, I realized that drawing a line with the Harpers was more than just about setting boundaries. It was about reclaiming our lives. And as unrealistic or as distant as it felt, the possibility of a new beginning filled me with a cautious hope, a hope that we could one day be truly free. The idea of moving to a new home was like a beacon, guiding me through the fog of uncertainty that had enveloped us. Every morning I woke up with renewed purpose, scrolling through listings and crunching the numbers. The thought of having a place solely ours, free of surprise visits and the looming threat of Mrs. Harper, kept me fueled. Marcus noticed the change in me, my newfound energy and focus. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" he asked one evening as he peered over my shoulder at the screen. "I've never been more serious about anything," I replied without hesitation. The light at the end of the tunnel was not just a distant dream anymore. It was something tangible, a place where we could rewrite the rules of family and togetherness. We figured out that if we were frugal, saved relentlessly, and perhaps moved a bit further from the city, we could do it. There'd be sacrifices. Longer commutes, fewer takeouts, less spontaneous weekend getaways. But the trade-off seemed more than worth it. And so began our quiet rebellion. To the world, and especially to the Harpers, our life continued unchanged. But beneath the surface, we were laying the groundwork for our escape. We would nod and smile through obligatory family dinners, all the while mentally planning our future home's layout, the garden we'd plant, and the color of the living room walls. As I went about my days, I couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt thinking about how I was deceiving Mrs. Harper. Regardless of everything, she was Marcus's mother. But the memories of her cutting remarks and the relentless demands quickly snuffed out any pangs of conscience. This was not just about me anymore. It was about the life Marcus and I deserved, a life we intended to build together. After several months of meticulous planning and saving, I found it, a little fixer-upper on the outskirts of town, within our modest budget. It was love at first sight, at least for me. Marcus took a little persuading, but when he saw the way my eyes lit up as I talked about transforming the rundown home into our sanctuary, he was sold. With the help of a small loan and a lot of determination, we began the process of purchasing the house. It was during this time that I started to see a change in Marcus. The house gave him something concrete to fight for, a stake in our joint defiance against his mother's dominion over our lives. He became more assertive, outlining boundaries with his parents, even within our current living space. Simple things like quiet Sundays just for us became non-negotiable. There was a newfound peace between us, a strengthening bond fortified by the shared goal. Occasionally, we'd catch each other's eye and smile, silently affirming our decision. It wasn't long before the papers were signed and the keys were in our hands. The reality of it hadn't quite sunk in yet, but as we stood on the threshold of our new home, it felt like the first breath of spring after a harsh winter. We had done it. We had started the journey to reclaim our lives. Mrs. Harper, in her oblivion, remained none the wiser about the move. To her, we were the obedient children, never stepping out of line. The idea that we had mustered the courage to leave never crossed her mind. We chose not to tell her until everything was set in stone, anticipating the inevitable storm. It was the silence before that storm that I savored most, those tranquil moments where our future was just ours, bright and filled with promise. This house, our new beginning, would be the testament to our love, one not even Mrs. Harper could meddle with. It was the stage for a lifetime of memories we would create, just Marcus and me, together. Our excitement was palpable as we stepped into our new home for the first time as owners. It needed work, but that did little to dampen our spirits. We spent evenings flipping through paint swatches and imagining where each piece of furniture would go. What once was a picture in our minds was slowly taking shape right before our eyes. Every decision we made, from choosing the bathroom tiles to deciding on the curtains, felt like a declaration of our autonomy. We were giddy with the freedom of it all, even if it meant rolling up our sleeves and staining our hands with paint and dirt. The work was hard, but it was ours, and every brushstroke felt like a small victory. There was, however, an unspoken understanding that the real test was still to come. The day we'd face Mrs. Harper and tell her we were moving out was drawing near. With each box we packed, I could feel my anxiety growing. One evening, as Marcus and I sat amidst a fort of cardboard and bubble wrap, I turned to him. "We should tell your parents about the move soon, before they visit and find the place half empty." Marcus's hands stilled from taping up a box. He took a deep breath, nodding in agreement. "You're right, we can't avoid it any longer. I'll talk to them this weekend." "Are you really ready for that conversation?" I asked, sensing the hesitancy in his voice. "No, but it's about drawing that line, right? Making sure they know this is our choice, our life," he said, a note of conviction entering his voice. "So, when we tell them, will you handle it, or do you want me to be there too?" I queried, preparing myself mentally for whatever role I needed to play in this pivotal moment. He paused, considering. "I think we should do it together. It'll send a clearer message that we are united in this." I nodded, strengthened by his resolve. This wasn't just about moving homes, it was about setting the tone for our relationship with the Harpers here on out. Later that weekend, the air was tense with anticipation. We invited Mrs. Harper and her husband over for what they thought was just a regular catch-up over tea, but we had rehearsed our lines, preparing for every possible reaction. When they arrived, the conversation started on an innocuous note: jobs, health, the usual pleasantries. Then, as the tea began to cool, Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, Dad, Elena and I have something important to discuss with you." Mrs. Harper eyed us, her intuition likely picking up on the seriousness of our demeanors. "What is it, dear?" "We've bought a house," Marcus announced, his eyes locking with hers. "It's out of town, and we'll be moving soon." Silence followed, a heavy, thick presence in the room. Mrs. Harper sat back in her chair, recovered from her initial shock, her expression unreadable. Mr. Harper, always less forthcoming with his thoughts, merely raised his eyebrows. Her lips pursed. Mrs. Harper finally spoke. "A house? And when were you planning on telling us about this very mature decision?" Her tone was spiked with sarcasm, but her usual biting remark was absent, replaced by something that sounded almost like grudging respect. "We wanted you to be the first to know once it was certain," I chimed in, trying to bridge the sudden gap that had formed at the table. "It's a new chapter for us, and we're really looking forward to it." The rest of the visit was cloaked in a strange formality. But as they left, there was no uproar, no dramatic protest, just a quiet acceptance that things between us would change. Maybe Mrs. Harper understood on some level that this was inevitable, a natural progression of our married life. As the door closed behind them, I let out the breath I'd been holding. The blueprint of our new life had been laid out, and as daunting as it was to confront Mrs. Harper, Marcus and I had done it. Together. Our foundation was solid, our walls built on love and support for one another. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. The house was more than a set of keys or a deed. It was our statement, our commitment to a life where our choices were just that. Ours. It represented our courage to break free from the shackles of expectation and to tread our own path. For the first time in a long while, the future was brimming with brightness, and I was eager to see where our journey would take us. The conversations with the Harpers, though subdued, hung over our heads as Marcus and I continued the laborious process of moving. We had expected theatrics, torrents of disapproval, but their subdued reaction had left us feeling strangely unsettled. It was as if we were bracing for a wave that never came crashing down. Marcus and I spent our days packing up our apartment, each box filled not only with our possessions, but also with memories. Somehow, among these cardboard containers, there was a sense of both closure and new beginnings. We acknowledged that telling the Harpers about the house was never going to be the hardest part. We were still their children, in one way or another. The true challenge was establishing our independence and making it clear that moving forward, their input in our lives would be limited to what we welcomed. We planned our move meticulously, deciding it best not to reveal our new address to Mrs. Harper, at least not yet. We knew she meant well in her own way, but we couldn't risk our newfound autonomy. The moving day came faster than expected, and we found ourselves standing in an empty apartment, echoes of the past bouncing off the bare walls. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I replied, fighting the swell of emotions. It was the end of an era, and the magnitude of the moment wasn't lost on us. We made our way to our new home, heartbeats keeping time with the rhythm of the road. Arriving at the house, we were greeted by the chaotic melody of moving, boxes being shuffled, furniture being arranged, and voices giving directions. In the midst of it all, I realized this was the first time in years I felt truly alive. Later that afternoon, as the movers took their leave and the dust settled, we sat on the porch steps, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the place we now called home. It felt right, like every decision we ever questioned led us perfectly here. We'd barely begun to enjoy the quiet when a car pulled up the driveway. Unexpected, unannounced. It was the Harpers. My heart sank, and I glanced at Marcus, who wore a similar expression of dismay. "How did they find us?" I whispered as Mrs. Harper, followed by her husband, strode toward us with her usual determination. "Elena, Marcus, quite the hideaway you've found yourselves," Mrs. Harper began, her eyes scanning the property. "You really should have told us about the moving day. We would have loved to help." Marcus stood, positioning himself between me and his mother, a silent signal of protection. "Mom, we wanted to do this on our own. It's important to us." However, Mrs. Harper seemed unfazed by our attempts to assert our boundaries, and it quickly became apparent why they were there. "Your home is quite spacious. Surely you wouldn't mind if we stayed for a while. A fresh change of scenery would do your father and me good," she stated, a glint of triumph shining in her eyes. An icy wave of indignation washed over me, but it was Marcus's response that surprised me most. "No, Mom," he said firmly, his voice steady and confident. "Elena and I need this space to ourselves. This is our time." Mrs. Harper's smile faltered, a crack in her composure that I had never seen before. Mr. Harper placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of solidarity. The conversation that ensued tested our resolve as Mrs. Harper pushed, cajoled, and attempted to guilt us into submission. Yet, despite the emotional tumult, Marcus and I found strength in our shared resolve. Eventually, with a resigned huff, Mrs. Harper conceded, leaving us in the quiet of our victory. Amid the twilight hush, Marcus wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into his embrace. For the first time in a long while, the future felt like a canvas we could color with our own aspirations. Turning the tables on the expectations and constraints had not been easy, and as twilight wrapped around us, I knew there'd be more challenges. But in that moment, the house stood not just as a structure of wood and stone, but as a testament to our determination to live life on our own terms. From the porch of our new home, with the Harper's car disappearing into the twilight, the world felt expansive and filled with possibility. We had taken the leap, weathered the confrontation, and now we faced a horizon that was wholly ours. There, in the quiet after the Harper's retreat, we began to dream of all the tomorrows we would build in the sanctuary we had fought so hard for. In the wake of the Harper's visit, Marcus and I spent the evening unpacking and arranging our new home, a tangible reminder of the independence we had fought so hard to achieve. Our efforts throughout the day had been fueled by an adrenaline born of both excitement and the confrontation with his parents. Now, as night descended, we moved slower, fatigue making our movements languid. Despite the physical weariness, there was a lightness to our spirits, a shared sense of accomplishment that seemed to fill the empty spaces of our still half-furnished house. We exchanged tired but genuine smiles as we realized the Harpers' unexpected visit had been a final test, one we had passed together. Marcus plopped down on the couch amongst a sea of packing paper. I can't believe we did it. They left, Elena. Mom actually left. I chuckled, settling down beside him. We did, didn't we? Stood our ground and protected our peace. The following morning brought with it the sounds of a new beginning, the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in our backyard. Over coffee, Marcus and I discussed what the future could hold. A garden here, a fresh coat of paint there. With each idea, the house felt more like a home, our safe haven. We weren't naive enough to think that this would be the last of the challenges with the Harpers, but we had proven to ourselves that we had the strength to face them together. It was a partnership solidified not just by love, but by mutual respect and the fierce defense of our shared values. Weeks slipped past, the crisp edges of our resolve softening into the comfortable rhythms of our daily lives. The Harpers remained a distant thought, their presence more like the echo of a heavy door slamming shut, signaling our release. We occasionally heard from them, but the calls were brief, the tones civil. Something had shifted, a veil had been lifted. One evening, as the scent of a home-cooked meal filled our kitchen, the phone rang. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It was his mother. Taking a deep breath, he answered. I watched, ready to support him through whatever demand or criticism might come. But as the conversation unfolded, his expression softened. I could only catch one side of the exchange, though it became clear that the discussion was not about intruding or overstepping. When Marcus hung up, he looked over at me, his eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions. That was Mom. She sounded different. Reflective, even. And, I prompted, wary of getting my hopes up. She apologized, Elena. She said she's been thinking about everything, about how she's acted, and she's sorry. She wants to try to understand us, to have a relationship that respects our boundaries. It was a lot to process, a turn of events I hadn't anticipated. Marcus approached, taking my hands in his. I know we've been through a lot because of her, but maybe this is a chance for something new, something healthier. It was a possibility that felt both fragile and promising. We agreed to take it slow to see if Mrs. Harper's change of heart was new. Deep down, I hoped for reconciliation, not just for our sake, but for the joy it could bring Marcus. Our house had become a symbol of our self-determination, a fort protecting us from external forces. But it was also becoming a place of healing, a space where broken ties could be carefully knotted back together. The true test of our new life wouldn't be in keeping people out. It would be in learning which ones we could cautiously let back in. In the weeks that followed, the tentative olive branch extended by Mrs. Harper gradually began to take root. The calls between Marcus and his parents became more frequent, their subject matter progressively lighter and tinged with a genuine desire to understand our boundaries. As for me, I watched this transformation from a careful distance, a spectator to the quiet mending of a once fractured family bond. It was a healing I hadn't dared hope for, and yet there it was, unfolding before me with each shared laugh and tender compromise. One sunny Saturday morning, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his cell phone pressed to his ear, the sunbeams weaving golden streaks across his face. The laughter I heard from his end of the call filled the room with a kind of warmth that no ray of sunlight could match. When he ended the call, he turned to me, his eyes alight with a happiness I hadn't seen in such a long time. The folks want to plan a visit, he said, the word folks feeling less like a title and more like an endearment. But this time they're asking when would be convenient for us. That's definitely a change, I replied, the corners of my mouth curving into an optimistic smile. In the midst of planning for the Harpers' first post-reconciliation visit, our life in the new house settled into a comfortable routine, each day weaving itself seamlessly into the next. We had begun making memories in every corner of our home, the good and the bad, the mundane and the sublime, all decorating the canvas of our shared existence. And then as autumn whispered its approach with cool breezes and the crinkling of leaves, we were presented with a surprise that would alter the course of our lives forever. Marcus, coming home with an aura of secrecy, held behind his back a small white envelope, the edges slightly crumpled from his nervous grip. I picked up the mail today, he said, a quiver of excitement in his voice. Handing me the envelope, he watched my every movement as I tore it open. My eyes scanned the contents, the words blurring and refocusing as the meaning behind them dawned on me. It was a letter. An invitation to a new adventure, a new life, one we had created together. I was pregnant. We were going to be parents. In that moment, our house transformed into a home in the truest sense, a shelter for our growing family. All the challenges we had faced, the battles we had fought to claim this space as ours, suddenly seemed small in the face of this new, profound purpose. The news of our impending parenthood set a whirlwind of joy into motion. Marcus swept me into his arms, and amidst our laughter and tears, we imagined the new chapter that awaited us, a chapter filled with first steps, first words, and the countless firsts we would experience together as a family. Our journey had been unpredictable, a path strewn with obstacles that, at times, seemed insurmountable. But as we looked ahead, with the promise of new life on the horizon, we knew that every step had been worth it. This house, this elegant structure of wood and paint, of dreams and determination, stood as the physical embodiment of our journey. It was the beginning of our legacy, one of love and unity, one that would now continue with the laughter and footsteps of our child. From this day on, it would be more than just a house. It would be the keeper of memories, the backdrop of our child's childhood, and the setting of our family's story. We were ready to embrace the new, to step boldly onto the brighter path that we had paved for ourselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden glow over our home, I realized that it wasn't the end of our struggles, nor the end of our victories. It was simply another bend in the road, another opportunity for growth and discovery. With hearts full and hands united, we turned towards the future, towards a life of possibilities. And together, with love as our guide, we stepped into the luminous embrace of the days ahead. As we stepped into her perfectly manicured living room, she smirked, "Oh, wearing that dress again? Brave choice." Her words, sharp as thorns, were just the beginning. But this time, I wasn't going to let her have the last word. The drive to my mother-in-law's house always fills me with a sense of dread, a feeling I've come to expect every time we visit. Today was no different. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed the curtains twitch, a sure sign that she was already watching, already judging. My husband, Alex, gripped the steering wheel a bit tighter as we got out of the car. I could sense his unease, a mirror of my own. The door opened before we could even knock, and there she stood. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Darling, you look tired," she said to Alex, her voice dripping with a concern that didn't quite feel genuine. "And you, well, it's nice to see you making an effort," she added, eyeing my carefully chosen outfit. The comments were subtle, the kind that you couldn't quite call out without seeming overly sensitive, but they were there, little jabs meant to unsettle. As we walked into the living room, I noticed the family photos displayed prominently. Alex as a child with his father, but none with us, his current family. Lunch was a quiet affair. The tension hung in the air, thick and unspoken. Maëlle asked questions, her tone casual, but there was an undercurrent of something else, a need to assert her dominance, to remind us of her place in Alex's life. "So, how's work going, Alex? I hope you're not still letting them overwork you," she said, her eyes briefly flickering to me, as if I were the one pushing him too hard. Alex mumbled a response, keeping his eyes on his plate. I could feel the frustration radiating off him. It was always like this. She'd make these comments, and he'd shrink back, the little boy who couldn't please his mother. As we sat in her overly floral living room after lunch, sipping tea from fine china, the conversation turned to family news. She spoke of cousins and aunts, but it was clear the news was carefully curated. Anything positive about our life was glossed over, while any struggle was dissected in excruciating detail. I found myself zoning out, staring at a spot on the wall, wondering why we kept putting ourselves through this. Why did we subject ourselves to these subtle but constant critiques? But I knew the answer. It was for Alex. Despite everything, he wanted his mother's approval, her love. As we finally made our excuses to leave, Maëlle's tone changed. "You know I only want the best for you both," she said, her voice soft, but the words felt hollow after everything else. The drive back was quiet. I reached over and squeezed Alex's hand. We were in this together, but I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever change. If she would ever see the hurt she caused, or if this dance would go on forever. But as we drove away, I looked back at the house, a knot of unease in my stomach. There was a part of me, a small, whispering voice, that wondered if maybe, just maybe, things would catch up with her, that the way she treated us, the way she'd always treated Alex, would have consequences. It was a thought I didn't want to entertain, but it was there, lurking in the back of my mind. As we turned the corner, I let out a sigh, trying to leave the tension and the unspoken words behind. But they clung to me, a reminder of the day and of the challenges we faced. Challenges that I feared were far from over. The weeks following our visit to my mother-in-law's house were filled with a subtle, lingering tension. Alex seemed more withdrawn, his usually bright demeanor dimmed by the shadow of that day. It wasn't just me who noticed. During a weekend brunch, our friend Sarah commented on it. "Alex, you okay? You seem a bit off," she said, her brow furrowed in concern. He offered a weak smile. "Just tired, I guess. Work's been hectic." But I knew it wasn't just work. It was his mother's words, echoing in his mind, undermining his confidence. It was a pattern I'd seen too often. One evening, as we sat on our couch, a family group chat on his phone lit up. It was his mother, sharing news about a distant relative's success. The message was innocent enough, but it was her follow-up that struck a nerve. "Wish we had some good news from our side to share. Right, Alex?" It was a subtle dig, a reminder of our recent struggles with buying a house, something she knew was a sensitive topic. Alex's face tightened, and he put his phone away without responding. "Why does she do that?" I asked gently, not wanting to push him, but needing to understand. He shrugged, a gesture of defeat. "That's just how she is, always pointing out what's wrong, never seeing the good." It was then that I realized how deeply his mother's words affected him. They weren't just annoying comments, they were chisels, slowly chipping away at his self-esteem. The turning point came a few weeks later at a family barbecue. The sun was bright, the kids were playing in the yard, and for a moment, it felt like a normal, happy gathering. But then Maëlle arrived, and the atmosphere shifted. She greeted everyone warmly, but her words were laced with subtle criticisms. To her niece, "That's a bold dress choice." To her sister, "I see you're still with that job." Each comment was a tiny barb, hidden beneath a veneer of concern. But it wasn't until she turned her attention to us that the real drama unfolded. "Alex, have you put on weight? And you, dear, still no news about a baby?" The words hung in the air, and I saw Alex's face flush with embarrassment and anger. There was a collective pause, a moment of shared discomfort among everyone present. It was Alex's sister, Lisa, who finally broke the silence. "Mom, that's enough. Can't you just be nice for one day?" Mill looked taken aback, as if she couldn't believe someone was calling her out. But Lisa didn't back down. "Every time we get together, you have to make these comments. Can't you see how they hurt people?" There was a tense silence, then Maëlle laughed it off. "Oh, you're all too sensitive." But something had shifted. People started to see her behavior for what it was. Whispers began, conversations started. It wasn't just us who had noticed, it was everyone. In the car ride home, Alex was quiet, but I could tell he was thinking. "Maybe Lisa's right," he finally said. "Maybe we don't have to just accept it." It was a small admission, but it felt significant. It was the beginning of a change, a realization that maybe we didn't have to be passive recipients of Maëlle's words. But as we drove, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. It was as if we had opened a door, and I wasn't sure what lay on the other side. All I knew was that things were about to change, and I wasn't sure if we were ready for what was to come. The family barbecue incident marked a turning point in how we and the rest of the family viewed Maëlle's behavior. There was a noticeable shift, a subtle but significant change in the dynamics. Conversations about her, once hushed and careful, became more open. It was as if Lisa's outburst had given everyone else permission to acknowledge what had been unspoken for so long. In the weeks that followed, I noticed a change in Alex too. He started to speak up more, to assert himself in small but meaningful ways. It was as if he was slowly shedding the weight of his mother's expectations, finding his own voice. But with change comes resistance, and Maëlle's response was swift and predictable. She began to call more frequently, her tone a mix of concern and criticism. "I just want what's best for you," she'd say, but her words felt hollow, especially now that we were all seeing the strings attached to her concern. Then came the family reunion, an event that had been planned for months. It was supposed to be a celebration, a gathering of generations. But as the day approached, the sense of dread that had become all too familiar crept back in. The reunion was as picturesque as one could imagine. A beautiful garden setting, tables laden with food, children laughing in the background. But beneath the surface there was an undercurrent of tension. Maëlle was in her element, fluttering from group to group, her laughter a little too loud, her smile a little too wide. But her eyes were watchful, scanning for any sign of dissent or disagreement. It wasn't long before a comment was made, a slight too far. This time, it was directed at Alex's cousin, a young woman who had recently started her own business. "A brave venture," Maëlle had said, "but are you sure you're not just afraid of real work?" The comment hung in the air, a palpable shockwave through the crowd. The cousin, taken aback, tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. The mood shifted, and conversations became more guarded, more careful. I watched as Alex's family began to see what he had seen for years. The mask was slipping, and Maëlle's true nature was becoming harder to ignore. As the day wore on, the tension grew. There were hushed conversations, side glances, a growing sense of unease. It was clear that things were reaching a boiling point. And then it happened. During a seemingly innocuous conversation about holiday plans, Maëlle made a comment about Alex and me, a thinly veiled insinuation about our financial struggles. It was Alex who responded, his voice steady but firm. "Mom, that's enough. Your comments are hurtful, not helpful." There was a moment of stunned silence, then Maëlle laughed, a brittle, forced sound. "Oh, you're all just too sensitive," she said, but her eyes were cold. The rest of the event passed in a blur, a tense and uncomfortable gathering where words were measured and laughter forced. But something had changed. The facade was crumbling, and the family was beginning to see Maëlle for who she really was. As Alex and I drove home, there was a sense of somber victory. It was as if a battle had been fought and won, but the war was far from over. But in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. Mill wouldn't take this lying down. She was a fighter, and she would come back, possibly stronger than before. And so, as we drove through the darkening streets, I braced myself for what was to come, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much larger storm. The days after the family reunion felt like the calm after a storm. Conversations within the family had changed. They were more open, more honest. The veil of pretense that Maëlle had maintained for so long was finally lifting. Alex's transformation was the most profound. No longer did he carry the weight of his mother's expectations like a yoke around his neck. There was a newfound lightness in him, a sense of liberation. It was as if he had been granted permission to be himself, without fear of his mother's judgment. But with this newfound freedom came a new set of challenges. Maëlle's reaction to this shift in family dynamics was as swift as it was predictable. She doubled down on her efforts to regain control, her calls and messages becoming more frequent, more insistent. Her tone had changed too. Gone was the veneer of concerned motherhood, replaced now by a thinly veiled desperation. She sensed the shift in her son and the family, and it frightened her. One evening, a call from Maëlle ended in a heated argument between her and Alex. Her words were sharp, cutting. "You've changed," she accused. "Ever since you married her, you've become someone I don't recognize." The words stung, but they also brought a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about control, it was about loss. Maëlle was losing her grip, not just on Alex, but on the narrative she had crafted about her family. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effect of Maëlle's actions became increasingly apparent. Family members began to distance themselves, their polite tolerance turning to open disapproval. Invitations to gatherings became less frequent, conversations more brief. It was during a casual lunch with Alex's aunt that the extent of the shift became clear. "We always knew she was a bit difficult," the aunt confessed, "but we never realized how much it affected you and Alex." The conversation was a revelation. It wasn't just us who had been affected by Maëlle's behavior. It was the entire family. And now that the truth was out in the open, it couldn't be ignored. But as the family's stance changed, so did Maëlle's tactics. She became more erratic, her actions more unpredictable. There were tearful apologies followed by angry outbursts, moments of vulnerability followed by aggressive assertions of her rights as a mother. The family was in uncharted territory. navigating a complex web of emotions and decades-long dynamics. It was exhausting, emotionally draining. But there was also a sense of progress, of moving towards something healthier, more honest. As Alex and I lay in bed one night, talking about the latest development, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was sympathy for Amiel, a woman who was clearly struggling to adapt to a changing world. But there was also frustration, anger at the years of hurt she had caused. "It's like she's her own worst enemy," Alex said quietly. "She pushes everyone away, but then can't understand why she's alone." His words were a succinct summary of the situation. Memiel, in her quest for control, had isolated herself, and now as the family began to heal and grow without her, she was left on the fringes, looking in. But as we turned off the lights and settled into sleep, I couldn't shake a lingering question. What would Amiel do next? How would she react to this new reality? And so, as I drifted off to sleep, I prepared myself for what was to come, knowing that the story was far from over. The weeks following our conversation with Alex's aunt were a period of uneasy transition. The family, once bound by a silent agreement to overlook Amiel's behavior, was now openly acknowledging the elephant in the room. And with this acknowledgement came a shift in the family's dynamics. Amiel, sensing her loss of influence, oscillated between attempts at reconciliation and bouts of resentment. Her calls to Alex became a mix of tearful pleas and bitter accusations. Each conversation left him drained, torn between his duty as a son and his need to protect himself and our family from her emotional turmoil. It was during one of these calls that the inevitable happened. Amiel, in a moment of unguarded frustration, uttered words that would irreparably alter her relationship with her son. "You were always a disappointment," she said, her voice laced with years of unspoken bitterness. The words hung in the air, a painful echo of every fear and insecurity Alex had ever harbored. The call ended abruptly, and in the silence that followed I saw something break in him. It was as if those words had severed the last thread of hope he had held for a reconciliation. The fallout was immediate. Word of the conversation spread through the family, and what little sympathy Amiel had retained quickly evaporated. Family gatherings became more infrequent, and when they did occur, Amiel's presence was noticeably absent. But it wasn't just the family that turned away. Friends, neighbors, people who had once been part of her social circle began to distance themselves. Her world, once filled with the buzz of constant activity, grew quieter, lonelier. As for Alex and me, the weeks turned into months of reflection and healing. We spent long evenings talking, unraveling years of emotional baggage, understanding how deeply Amiel's words and actions had impacted our lives. It was during one of these conversations that Alex made a decision that marked a turning point in our journey. "I need to let go," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "For my own sake, for our sake. I can't keep hoping she'll change." The decision wasn't easy. It came with a sense of loss, a mourning for what could have been, but it also brought a sense of peace, a relief from the constant strain of navigating Amiel's emotional landscape. In the months that followed, Amiel's attempts to reconnect became more desperate, more frequent, but each call, each message, was met with a firm but gentle boundary. We were moving on, building a life free from the shadow of her influence. And as we did, something remarkable happened. The family began to heal. Without the constant undercurrent of Amiel's presence, relationships blossomed, conversations became more genuine, more heartfelt. There was a sense of unity, of coming together in the wake of a shared struggle. But amid this newfound peace, there was also a sense of sadness. Amiel, once the matriarch of the family, was now a peripheral figure, a reminder of the damage that can be done by unspoken words and unresolved emotions. As the year drew to a close, the family gathered for a holiday celebration. It was a bittersweet gathering, filled with laughter and love, but also tinged with the absence of one who had once been at its center. And as we raised our glasses in a toast, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey we had taken, from pain and conflict to understanding and growth. It was a journey marked by loss, but also by a profound sense of liberation. But in the back of my mind, I knew that Amiel's story was not over. Her journey was her own, a path marked by the consequences of her actions. And as we celebrated together, I hoped that she too would find her way. that she would learn from the echoes of her past and find peace in her own way. The year following our decision to set boundaries with MIL was one of profound growth for both Alex and me. It was a time of healing, of rediscovering ourselves outside the shadow of her influence, but it was also a time of reflection, of understanding the depth of the impact she had on our lives. Alex, in particular, underwent a transformation. Freed from the burden of his mother's expectations, he began to flourish. His confidence grew, his happiness more genuine. It was as if a weight had been lifted, allowing him to be the person he was always meant to be. But as we moved forward, there was also an undercurrent of sadness. The decision to distance ourselves from MIL wasn't made lightly. It came with a sense of loss, a mourning for the relationship that could have been. We often talked about her, wondering how she was, hoping that she was finding her own path to healing. The family, too, had changed. Without the constant drama that had once surrounded Mael, relationships began to strengthen. There was a newfound appreciation for each other, a deeper understanding born from shared experiences. But the true test of our growth came towards the end of the year, when we received a call from Mael. Her voice was different, softer, tinged with something that sounded like regret. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about everything, and I'm sorry." The words were unexpected, and they brought a mix of emotions. There was skepticism, a wary caution born from years of disappointment, but there was also a flicker of hope, a possibility of reconciliation. We agreed to meet, a small gathering at her house. The atmosphere was tentative, each of us unsure of how to navigate this new terrain. Emile was quieter, more reflective. She talked about her loneliness, about the realization that her actions had consequences. There were moments of defensiveness, old habits dying hard, but there was also an acknowledgement of her faults, a willingness to change. The meeting ended with no grand resolutions, no definitive conclusions, but it was a start, a small step towards understanding and perhaps forgiveness. As Alex and I drove home, we talked about the future, about what this new development meant for us. "Maybe there's a chance for something better," Alex said, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. And as we talked, I realized that this journey was about more than just MIL and her actions. It was about us, about our ability to grow, to overcome, to find strength in the face of adversity. It was a journey that had brought us closer, that had taught us the value of boundaries, of self-respect. And as we looked towards the future, I knew that whatever it held, we would face it together, stronger and more united than ever. Years later, as I watched our children play in the backyard, I reflected on the journey we had taken. The path had not been easy, but it had been necessary. It had brought us to where we were today, a place of peace and happiness. Mael was still a part of our lives, but in a different way. The relationship was more balanced, more healthy. There were still moments of tension, reminders of the past, but they were fewer, less impactful. As I watched our family, I realized that this was what we had been working towards all along, a family built on respect, on understanding, on love. It was a new beginning, a chance to break the cycle of the past and create something better for the future. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the scene, I felt a sense of contentment, a deep and abiding gratitude for the journey we had taken. It had brought us here, to this moment, and for that I was profoundly thankful. I don't want her here on the day I'm trying to recover. Frankly, she scares me a bit. I don't know, Mom, she's almost like a psychopath. Sarah's voice was barely audible over the phone, but I could hear the fear and pain in her words. My mother-in-law had just barged into their home, ignoring Sarah's swollen face from the wisdom tooth surgery, and demanded to see my son, who was at the hospital for a kidney stone. She had no regard for anyone else's feelings, and only her own. She was a nightmare, and she was about to become my worst enemy. I remember that day vividly, the sky a dull gray, mirroring my mood as I mulled over the recent call from my daughter-in-law. She sounded exhausted, her voice a mere whisper, burdened with the weight of recent events. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in front of me as I replayed her words in my head. It was like she was on a mission, you know? Sarah had said, her voice tinged with disbelief. Your mother-in-law just stormed in here like a hurricane. I couldn't even get up to stop her, what with my jaw aching from the wisdom tooth surgery. I sighed, rubbing my temples. This wasn't the first time my mother-in-law, whom I'll call Mrs. H, had overstepped boundaries, but this was certainly one of her more dramatic exploits. Knowing her, she must have heard the message about my son, David, passing a kidney stone and needing surgery, and decided it was her cue to play the hero. She didn't even knock, just burst in and started calling out for David, Sarah continued, her voice a mixture of pain and frustration. I tried to tell her he wasn't here, that he was at the hospital, but she barely listened. She just kept pacing around, wringing her hands, making it all about her worry, completely ignoring my state. I remembered nodding, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. I'm so sorry, Sarah. She can be overwhelming. There was a pause, and then Sarah's voice lower. I don't want her here on the day I'm trying to recover. Frankly, she scares me a bit. I don't know, Mom, she's almost like a psychopath. The word had hit me hard. Psychopath wasn't a term thrown around lightly in our family. Yet, in that moment, reflecting on Mrs. H's history of disregard for others' feelings, it didn't seem too far-fetched. As I hung up the phone, I felt a knot of worry in my stomach. Mrs. H's actions were escalating, and now she was affecting not just me, but my son and his wife. I wondered how many more of these missions we'd have to endure before something gave way. I took a sip of my now cold coffee, its bitterness somehow fitting. I needed to do something, but what? Mrs. H was a force of nature, seemingly impervious to reason or empathy. As I stared out the window at the drab day, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning of a series of unwelcome visits, and I needed to brace myself for what was to come. The next day, I decided to visit Sarah. As I walked up the path to their home, I could see the curtains twitching slightly. Sarah opened the door, her face swollen on one side from the surgery, but she managed a weak smile. "Hi, Mom," she greeted me, stepping aside to let me in. The house was quiet, the usual chaos of kids and daily life subdued. I followed Sarah into the living room, where she eased herself onto the couch with a sigh. "I really appreciate you coming over," she said, her voice still soft and strained. I took a seat opposite her. "Of course, Sarah. I wanted to check on you, and, well, talk about yesterday." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I just don't understand her, your mother-in-law. It's like she completely disregards anyone else's feelings." I nodded, understanding her frustration. "She's always been like that, unfortunately. It's her way or no way. She doesn't see how her actions affect others." Sarah looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and anger. "It's not just that. When she was here, she acted like my surgery was nothing compared to David's situation. I mean, I know kidney stones are serious, but I was in pain too." "That's just like her," I said, my voice laced with bitterness. "She has a way of making everything about herself." Sarah leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. And then, the way she spoke about the kids' lunch, it was so petty, asking if I had chicken nuggets and fries in the freezer, and then ranting about not buying them lunch because it's too expensive. She knows we're trying to save money with the baby coming. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. She's wealthy enough to help, but she chooses not to. It's her way of maintaining control, I think. The conversation shifted as we discussed strategies to handle Mrs. H's behavior. We agreed that setting boundaries was essential, though we both knew it would be challenging. As I left their house that day, my heart was heavy. I knew that this situation with Mrs. H was far from over. It was affecting my family deeply, and the thought of what lay ahead was daunting. But I also felt a sense of resolve. Sarah and David needed my support, and I was determined to be there for them no matter what Mrs. H threw our way. A few days later, I found myself sitting across from my son David in a quaint cafe downtown. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes speaking volumes about his recent ordeal. As he stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, I couldn't help but notice the subtle grimace of pain he tried to hide. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I don't know what to do about Grandma. She's just too much." I sighed, taking a sip of my tea. "I know, David. I heard about her visit from Sarah, how she completely ignored Sarah's condition and made everything about you and your kidney stone." David nodded, a frown creasing his forehead. "Yeah, and it's not just that. When she found out we were getting groceries delivered, she had the audacity to ask Sarah what was wrong with her legs that she couldn't shop herself. Can you believe that?" I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. That's terrible, especially considering Sarah is pregnant and needs to rest. Your grandmother can be incredibly insensitive. David leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting to the window. And then she lied about you, said you were too busy to come with her to see us. I knew that wasn't like you, Mom. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. I would never say that, David. You and Sarah are my priority. I know how hard kidney stones can be, and I wanted to respect your need for privacy and rest. I even tried to stop her from going over. He squeezed my hand, a small smile appearing on his face. I know, Mom, and we appreciate that. It's just hard dealing with Grandma's antics. The conversation turned to how we could manage Mrs. H's behavior in the future. We discussed the importance of setting boundaries and being united as a family in our approach. David agreed, though I could see the apprehension in his eyes. Confronting Mrs. H was no small feat. As we parted ways, I felt a renewed sense of determination. My family was being torn apart by Mrs. H's actions, and it was up to me to help mend the rifts. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to stand up to her, for the sake of my son and his growing family. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was resolved to see it through. A week had passed since my conversation with David, and the tension within the family was palpable. I found myself sitting in my living room, the television on but unwatched, lost in thought. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. It was a message from Sarah asking if we could talk. I immediately called her. Hey, Sarah, what's up? I asked, trying to sound calm despite the worry knotting in my stomach. It's about Mrs. H again, she said, her voice strained. She's been telling people in the family that you refused to visit us because you were too busy, that you didn't care about David's condition. I felt a surge of anger. That's a blatant lie. I never said that. I care deeply about you both. You know that, right? Sarah sighed. I know, Mom. It's just frustrating. It feels like she's trying to turn the family against you. We talked at length about the situation. I reassured Sarah that I would handle Mrs. H and set the record straight. It was clear that Mrs. H's manipulative behavior was escalating, and I knew I had to confront her. The next day, I found myself at Mrs. H's doorstep, my heart racing but my resolve firm. She answered the door with a fake smile, which faltered when she saw the seriousness in my expression. Can we talk? I asked, not waiting for an invitation. Once inside, I confronted her about the lies she had been spreading. Why are you telling people I didn't want to visit David and Sarah? You know that's not true. Mrs. H's expression turned defensive. Well, you didn't come with me, did you? You always find excuses not to be involved. That's not fair, I countered. I respect David and Sarah's privacy and needs. Spreading lies about me is not helping anyone. The conversation grew heated, with Mrs. H trying to justify her actions and me trying to make her see the damage she was causing. It was clear that she was unwilling to acknowledge her role in the family's growing discord. As I left her house, I felt a mix of frustration and sadness. It was apparent that Mrs. H was not going to change easily. However, I was more determined than ever to protect my family from her toxic influence. It was going to be a tough journey, but one I was prepared to take for the sake of my son and his family. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew that standing up to Mrs. H was the first step towards healing the rift she had created. The confrontation with Mrs. H left me emotionally drained, but I knew the battle was far from over. The following day, as I was trying to immerse myself in gardening to clear my mind, my phone began buzzing incessantly. It was Mrs. H sending one text after another in rapid succession. I took a deep breath before checking the messages, bracing myself for what I might find. True to form, Mrs. H was in a state of near panic, her texts a flurry of concern and exasperation. Your son won't answer his phone. He needs to rest, not work. Can't you talk some sense into him? One message read. Another followed quickly. It's not right, him working while he's sick. You should convince him to stay home. I felt a twinge of frustration. David was an adult, capable of making his own decisions, especially about his health and work. Mrs. H's insistence on meddling was not only unwarranted but also intrusive. I replied calmly, trying to maintain a sense of diplomacy. David is aware of his condition and can decide for himself. I trust his judgment. But the texts kept coming, each more insistent than the last. Mrs. H seemed incapable of understanding the concept of boundaries or the fact that David was not a child to be coddled. As I sat there, phone in hand, a realization dawned on me. Mrs. H's incessant texting was more than just concern. It was her way of exerting control, of inserting herself into every aspect of our lives. It was suffocating. I decided then and there to set a firm boundary. I responded with a final text. I respect David's decisions as an adult. Please respect our wishes for space and autonomy. The rest of the day was spent in a tense silence, my phone mercifully quiet. I knew this was just a temporary reprieve, but it was a start. Mrs. H needed to understand that her behavior was not only unwelcome but also harmful. As I turned in for the night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension about what the next day might bring. Dealing with Mrs. H was like navigating a minefield, but for my family's sake, I was willing to tread carefully and stand firm. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the following days, a tense quietude settled over our family. My conversations with David and Sarah became more about how to handle Mrs. H's overbearing nature than about their day-to-day lives. It was during one such conversation over a cup of tea at their house that Sarah brought up a significant point. "You know, both David and I have stopped answering her calls," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and weariness. "It's the only way we feel we can get some peace." I nodded, understanding their need for this silent stand. It's a tough decision, but sometimes silence is the strongest message you can send. David, who had been quietly listening, added, "It's just, we need this time, especially with the baby coming. We can't have this constant stress." I reached across the table, squeezing Sarah's hand. "I support you both, and I'll continue to make it clear to her that this behavior is unacceptable." That evening, as I sat in my living room, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. Mrs. H's refusal to respect boundaries was straining our family ties. Yet, in this stand of silence, there was a glimmer of unity and strength. We were all in agreement that something had to change. A few days later, Mrs. H attempted to reach out to me again, her tone a mix of frustration and guilt-tripping. "I don't understand why everyone is avoiding me. I'm just trying to help," she texted. I took a moment before replying, choosing my words carefully. "We appreciate your concern, but we all need space. Respect and understanding go both ways." Her response was quick, a flurry of messages trying to justify her actions. But this time I did not engage further. It was clear that our silent stand needed to be upheld, at least until she was ready to have a constructive and respectful conversation. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet stand continued. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. In this silence, there was a sense of solidarity among us, a shared understanding that we were doing what was best for our family's well-being. As I lay in bed each night, I thought about the future, about how we would eventually need to bridge this gap with Mrs. H. But for now, this silent stand was our shield, a necessary barrier to protect the peace and sanity of our family. It was a difficult path, but one we were all committed to walking together. The silent stand with Mrs. H had stretched over a month, and its impact was palpable. It had given David and Sarah the much-needed respite to focus on their health and prepare for their new baby. For me, it had been a period of reflection and contemplation about the future dynamics of our family. One sunny afternoon, I invited David and Sarah for lunch at my home. The purpose was clear, to discuss how we could move forward with Mrs. H. As we sat around the dining table, the conversation gradually shifted from casual chatter to the matter at hand. "Mom, we can't go on like this forever," David said, breaking the ice. "We need to find a way to deal with Grandma that doesn't leave us constantly stressed out." Sarah nodded in agreement. "She's going to be a great-grandmother soon. We can't just cut her out entirely, but things can't go back to how they were either." I took a deep breath, acknowledging the truth in their words. We need to set clear boundaries with her, boundaries that she understands and respects, and we need to be united in this. We discussed various strategies like setting specific times for her to visit and call, and making it clear that unannounced visits were not acceptable. We also agreed on the importance of open communication, ensuring that Mrs. H understood the impact of her actions. The conversation wasn't easy. It brought up past grievances and frustrations, but it was necessary. We all understood that the path forward required effort and patience from each of us. As the meeting drew to a close, David brought up a crucial point. We need to have a sit-down with Grandma and lay all this out. It's the only way she might understand. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. I agree. It's time to have that conversation. The next few days were spent in preparation. We outlined what we wanted to say, ensuring we were on the same page. Finally, the day arrived to meet with Mrs. H. We chose a neutral location, a quiet park, hoping the open environment would lend a calm atmosphere to the discussion. Sitting on a park bench, we waited for Mrs. H. When she arrived, her initial confusion at the setting soon gave way to realization as we began to talk. The conversation was difficult, with moments of tension and emotion. We expressed our concerns and laid out the boundaries we expected her to respect. Mrs. H. listened, sometimes defensively, but as we continued, I could see a flicker of understanding in her eyes. As we parted ways, there was no definitive resolution, but there was a start, a foundation we could build upon. The path forward wouldn't be easy. It would require effort, understanding, and forgiveness from all sides. But for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope, a belief that our family could move beyond the drama and find a way to coexist in harmony. I, Eliza, sat across from Marianne, my mother-in-law. Her eyes, cold and calculating, bore into me over the dinner table. Nathan, my husband of 3 years, sat between us, a silent, uneasy spectator. "Eliza, dear, you really must learn to cook something more refined," Marianne commented, her voice dripping with condescendence as she pushed the homemade lasagna around her plate. I clenched my jaw, feeling a familiar surge of frustration. "I wasn't aware you disliked classic dishes, Marianne. Nathan always loved my cooking," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Nathan, as usual, stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on his plate. Marianne scoffed. "Nathan has always been too polite to criticize. But now that we're living together, I suppose it's my duty to guide you." Living together, a decision Nathan made without my consent, assuming I'd just adapt to his mother's constant presence in our home, our lives. The conversation shifted to mundane topics, but the undercurrent of hostility remained. As dinner concluded, I started clearing the table, my hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger. Nathan finally spoke, his words directed at his mother. "Mom, let me help with that." "No, Nathan, let Eliza do it. It's the least she can do since she doesn't contribute much else around here," Marianne retorted sharply. Nathan glanced at me apologetically but said nothing. I bit back a sharp retort, my heart pounding in silent fury. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. Nathan's passivity, Marianne's barbs, the feeling of being an outsider in my own home. I turned to Nathan, who was already drifting to sleep. "Nathan, we need to talk about your mother," I whispered, my voice strained. He murmured sleepily, "Not now, Eliza, we'll talk in the morning." But the morning brought no respite. I awoke to find Marianne in the kitchen, critiquing my organization of the pantry. Nathan had already left for work, conveniently escaping the daily battleground that our home had become. As the day wore on, my frustration grew. Every misplaced item, every veiled insult from Marianne felt like a deliberate provocation. I started to wonder if Nathan saw the extent of his mother's interference, or if he chose to remain blissfully ignorant. That evening, I decided it was time to confront the issue head-on. "Marianne, I think it's important we set some boundaries," I said, my voice firmer than it had been in weeks. She looked up from her magazine, an amused smile playing on her lips. "Boundaries? My dear, this is my son's home as much as it is yours. I'm just here to help." "Help?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "By undermining me at every turn?" Marianne stood, her posture rigid with offense. "I am merely trying to ensure my son doesn't suffer because of your inadequacies. If anyone should be setting boundaries, it's me, to protect him from your shortcomings." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about differing personalities or minor disagreements. This was about respect, about my place in my own marriage, my own home. "Your son chose to marry me, Marianne. It's high time you respected that decision," I shot back, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see how long that lasts if you continue this attitude." The threat hung in the air between us, a clear warning of the battle lines being drawn. In that moment, I knew things couldn't continue this way. Something had to change. The morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, doing little to lift the heavy atmosphere in our home. I sat at the breakfast table, my coffee growing cold, as Marianne's voice sliced through the silence. You know, Eliza, a woman's place is in the home, ensuring her husband's comfort. It's a pity you're so career-focused, she said, her tone patronizing. I clenched my fists under the table. My career is important to me, Marianne. Nathan supports that, I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. She tutted, shaking her head. Supports or tolerates, there's a difference, dear. Before I could respond, Nathan walked in, his expression weary. Morning, he mumbled, avoiding my gaze as he sat down. I watched him, hoping for some sign of support, but he remained focused on his breakfast, a silent participant in the ongoing drama. The day progressed with an uneasy rhythm. Marianne found fault in everything I did, from the way I sorted the laundry to the choice of groceries. Her criticisms, once veiled, were now overt, designed to demean and provoke. In the evening, as we sat in the living room, Marianne broached a topic that made my blood run cold. Nathan, dear, I've been thinking, with Eliza so busy with her work, perhaps it's time we considered starting a family. You need an heir, after all. I felt a jolt of shock. Marianne, that's a decision for Nathan and me to make, not you, I interjected, my voice tight with anger. Nathan finally spoke, his words cautious. Mom, Eliza's right. That's our business. Marianne's eyes flashed with annoyance. I'm only thinking of your future, Nathan. You need someone who can give you a proper family, not just a paycheck. The implication was clear and cruel. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough, Marianne. You have no right to dictate our personal decisions. Nathan looked torn, his gaze flickering between us. Eliza, let's not make a scene, he said weakly. A scene? My voice rose in disbelief. Your mother is overstepping every boundary, and you're asking me to be quiet? Marianne stood, her expression one of feigned concern. Eliza, dear, I'm only looking out for my son's best interests. It's what a mother does. I stared at her, the realization dawning that she would never respect me or my marriage. Your best interests are ruining our lives, Marianne. Nathan's silence was deafening. It was clear where his loyalties lay. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me. I needed to escape, to breathe. Without another word, I grabbed my coat and left the house, the cold night air hitting me like a wave of freedom. As I walked, the tears I had been holding back began to fall, not just from anger, but from a deep sense of betrayal. I knew then that things had to change. I couldn't live in the shadow of Marianne's control, nor could I be part of a marriage where I was constantly undermined. It was time to make a stand, to fight back against the tyranny of a mother-in-law who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her control over her son. The confrontation with Marianne last night had left an icy tension in the house. As I, Eliza, moved about the kitchen preparing breakfast, I could feel her watching me, her gaze sharp and critical. Marianne broke the silence with a cutting remark. You know, Eliza, a woman who can't prioritize her family is hardly a woman at all. It's no wonder you're struggling to keep your husband happy. I stiffened, my grip tightening on the frying pan. My relationship with Nathan is none of your concern, Marianne, I said, struggling to keep my composure. Oh, but it is. Nathan is my son, and I won't watch him be neglected by a selfish wife, she retorted, her tone dripping with disdain. At that moment, Nathan walked in, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He paused, sensing the tension, but said nothing. Nathan, tell your wife where her duties lie, Marianne demanded, turning to him expectantly. Nathan hesitated, his gaze flickering between us. Eliza, maybe you could. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Maybe I could what, Nathan? Neglect my career, my aspirations, just to appease your mother? Nathan's silence was a clear answer. My heart sank as the reality of our situation sunk in. I was alone in this battle. The day worsened when I received a call from my boss. Marianne had interfered once again, canceling an important meeting I had scheduled, claiming it was for my family commitment. Returning home, I confronted Marianne. Why did you cancel my meeting? That was a professional commitment. Marianne looked at me, feigning innocence. I was merely helping. A wife should prioritize her home. Your work is secondary. That was not your decision to make, I exclaimed, my voice rising with every word. Nathan entered the room, his expression weary. Eliza, why are you making such a fuss? It was just a meeting. Just a meeting, I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. It's my career, Nathan. Your mother has no right to interfere. Marianne's voice was cold. I did it for your own good, Eliza. You're losing sight of what's important. Nathan needs a wife, not a businesswoman. I looked at Nathan, waiting for him to defend me, to stand up for us. But he remained silent, his loyalty to his mother unyielding. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The realization that my marriage was a sham, a one-sided effort, became painfully clear. You know what, Marianne? You win. You can have Nathan. I refuse to be part of this charade any longer, I declared, my voice firm and resolute. Nathan looked at me, finally speaking up. Eliza, you don't mean that. We can work this out. There's no we in this marriage, Nathan. It's always been you and your mother. I'm done being the third wheel in my own marriage, I replied, my decision final. I packed a bag with my essentials, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and relief. As I left the house, Marianne's triumphant smirk was the last thing I saw. Walking out that door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the end of my marriage, but the beginning of my fight for independence. I was no longer the victim. It was time for Marianne to realize she had underestimated me. The night air was chilly as I walked, each step away from the house, feeling like a step towards liberation. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, relief, but above all, a burning desire for retribution against Marianne. I found refuge at my sister's house. As I explained everything, her outrage mirrored my own. Eliza, this is unacceptable. You can't let them get away with this, she said, her voice laced with indignation. I won't, I replied, my resolve hardening. Marianne thinks she's won, but this is far from over. The next day, I started planning. My first step was to secure my financial independence. I contacted my bank to separate my finances from Nathan's. I knew Marianne would try to manipulate Nathan into controlling my assets, and I couldn't let that happen. As I was sorting through my finances, I received a call from Nathan. His voice was hesitant, apologetic. Eliza, can we talk? I think we've made a mistake. A mistake? I echoed, my voice cold. No, Nathan, the only mistake was thinking your mother would ever accept me. But Eliza, she's my mother. I thought you could learn to get along, he said, a note of desperation in his voice. Get along? With a woman who has done nothing but undermine and disrespect me? I'm done, Nathan. I'm filing for divorce, I declared, my decision unwavering. There was a pause, and when Nathan spoke again, his tone had changed. You can't do that, Eliza. Think about what you're throwing away. I've thought about it, Nathan. I'm throwing away a marriage where I was never valued. I deserve better. I replied, cutting the call short. The following weeks were a blur of legal consultations and meetings. I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Nathan tried to convince me to return, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done being manipulated. Meanwhile, Marianne's true nature began to show. She launched a smear campaign, telling our mutual friends and family that I was abandoning Nathan, painting herself as the victim. But I was prepared. I had documented everything, her intrusive behavior, her attempts to control my life, even the incident with my work meeting. As the divorce proceedings began, Nathan was caught off guard by the evidence I presented. Marianne's facade began to crumble under the weight of her own deceit. One evening, as I sat reviewing legal documents, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. Marianne had underestimated me, thinking she could control my life. But I was fighting back, reclaiming my independence. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready for it. Marianne had awakened a strength in me I never knew I had. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. The divorce proceedings became a battleground where every meeting was a clash of wills. Marianne, through Nathan, fought fiercely, trying to salvage what little control she had left over the situation. But I stood my ground, armed with evidence and a newfound determination. During one heated mediation session, Marianne attempted to play the victim. Eliza is tearing this family apart. Nathan, tell them how she's always put her work before you, before us, she pleaded, her voice quivering with feigned emotion. I looked at her, my eyes steely. The only thing tearing this family apart is your inability to let Nathan live his own life. You've smothered him, and you tried to smother me, I retorted, my voice firm. Nathan sat there, a picture of confliction. Eliza, isn't there a way we can work this out? I don't want to lose you, he stammered, his eyes pleading. I felt a pang of sorrow for what we had once shared, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of our broken marriage. "There's nothing left to work out, Nathan. Your mother made sure of that." As the legal battles dragged on, Marianne's attempts to manipulate the narrative became more desperate. She even resorted to calling my employer, trying to paint me as an unstable and unreliable employee. But her efforts backfired. My boss, aware of my personal situation, offered support instead of censure. Then, the ultimate blow came. During a particularly intense meeting, I revealed the recordings I had made of Marianne's derogatory remarks and her admitting to sabotaging my professional commitments. The revelation was a turning point. Nathan's facade of denial crumbled as he was faced with the undeniable truth of his mother's manipulative behavior. "You did all this, Mom? Why?" Nathan asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and hurt. Marianne's composure finally broke. "I did it for you, Nathan. She was never right for you. I was protecting you." But Nathan seemed to see her for what she truly was, protecting me or controlling me. He shot back, his voice tinged with bitterness. As the meetings continued, Nathan became more withdrawn, the reality of his mother's actions and his own inaction dawning on him. He attempted to reach out to me privately, expressing regret and sorrow. But it was too late. The damage was done, and my decision was final. The day the divorce was finalized was a day of mixed emotions. Relief, because I was finally free from Marianne's grasp. Sadness for the love I once had for Nathan that was now lost. But above all, there was a sense of triumph. Marianne had tried to break me, but instead, she had forged me into someone stronger. I walked out of the courthouse, the sun shining brightly, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had faced my oppressor and emerged victorious. It was the end of a painful chapter, but the beginning of a new journey, one where I was in control of my own destiny. The finalization of my divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Freed from the chains of a toxic marriage and Marianne's manipulation, I found myself embracing a newfound independence. I dove into my career with renewed vigor. My dedication paid off, and soon I was offered a promotion. The success was sweet, not just for its professional rewards, but also as a testament to my resilience. Marianne's attempts to sabotage my career had not only failed but had propelled me to greater heights. As I thrived, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Nathan and Marianne's relationship had soured. Without me as a buffer, the full brunt of Marianne's controlling nature fell on Nathan. They argued frequently, their once close bond strained by the very tactics Marianne had employed to keep Nathan under her thumb. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. I had escaped a life of submission and emerged stronger, more self-assured. The struggles I had endured were now pillars of my newfound strength. However, my triumph was not without a touch of sorrow. I thought of Nathan, the man I had once loved, now a victim of his mother's machinations. His regret was palpable in the few messages he sent, expressing his realization of the truth too late. It was during this time that I received an unexpected call from Nathan. His voice was a mix of desperation and sadness. "Eliza, I'm sorry. I see it now, all of it, Mom. She's not the person I thought she was." I listened, a mix of emotions swirling within me. "Nathan, I wish you had seen it sooner, but we can't change the past." "I know. I miss you. I miss us," he confessed, his voice cracking with emotion. I sighed, a part of me aching for the love we had lost. "Nathan, I've moved on. I hope you can too. You need to find your own path, free from your mother's influence." The call ended with a sense of closure. I felt for Nathan, but I also knew that our paths had irrevocably diverged. My journey was now my own, no longer overshadowed by the drama of my marriage. As weeks turned into months, my life settled into a peaceful rhythm. I found joy in small things, my work, my friends, my independence. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer painful. They were reminders of what I had overcome and the strength I had gained. The story of my marriage, once a tale of manipulation and control, had become a narrative of empowerment and resilience. I had not only survived, I had flourished. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city as I stood on my apartment balcony. It had been a year since my divorce, and life had settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. My career was thriving, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. A phone call interrupted my reverie. It was from an old mutual friend of Nathan and me. "Eliza, have you heard about Marianne?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "No, what happened?" I inquired, a sense of foreboding settling over me. "She's in the hospital. After you left, things between her and Nathan got worse. She had a fall, and, well, it's serious," she explained. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Marianne had been the source of so much pain in my life, yet I couldn't rejoice in her misfortune. "I see. Thanks for letting me know," I said, ending the call. The news stirred up a whirlwind of memories. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Marianne's actions, driven by her need to control, had ultimately led to her downfall. Later that evening, Nathan called. "Eliza, I don't know who else to turn to. Mom's not doing well, and I'm struggling," he confessed, his voice breaking. I listened, a sense of detachment washing over me. "Nathan, I'm sorry about your mother, but you need to be strong now. You have to make decisions for her and yourself." There was a pause, and then he whispered, "I miss you, Eliza. I wish things could have been different." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Nathan, we all make choices, and we live with the consequences. I've moved on, and I hope you can too. Find strength in yourself, not in others." As I hung up, I felt a chapter of my life definitively close. Nathan and Marianne's story was no longer mine. I had moved on, grown stronger, and learned to value myself above all. The next morning, as I walked to work, the city felt different, as if it mirrored my own liberation. I had faced my challenges head-on and emerged victorious. My past with Nathan and Marianne was a reminder of the strength that comes from adversity. It had taught me the importance of standing up for oneself and the dangers of losing oneself in another's shadow. As I looked ahead, I saw a future filled with possibilities. A life where I was the author of my own story, free from the chains of manipulation and control. In that moment, I realized the true meaning of empowerment. It wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about transforming them into stepping stones towards a better, stronger self. Marianne's karma was her own making, a result of her actions and choices. As for me, I had chosen a path of resilience and growth. The future was mine to shape, and I embraced it with open arms and a heart full of hope. The sound of tires screeching on asphalt was the last thing I expected to hear as I stood outside my home. In a flash, the world turned upside down, and I found myself lying on the ground, groceries scattered around me, my body screaming in pain. I had been hit by a car, and as I struggled to comprehend what had just happened, I realized the car was driven by none other than my mother-in-law, Linda. Later in the hospital, as I lay in bed nursing my injuries, the phone rang. It was Mark, my husband, sounding frantic. "Anna, you need to tell the police you just fell. They're saying someone saw Mom hit you with the car. Can you believe it?" His words hit me harder than the car. Not only had Linda run me over, but now Mark and his parents were trying to cover it up. As I listened to Mark's rambling excuses, my mind raced back to the days when our marriage seemed like a dream. We had met at the office, where he was assigned to mentor me. Mark was never the charming type, but over time, his steady presence and attention won me over. However, the fairy tale soon turned grim after our wedding. I quit my job and moved into his parents' house, a decision I soon regretted. Living with Linda and her husband George was a constant battle. Linda, with her sharp tongue and unyielding ways, made sure to remind me daily of my duties as a homemaker. "You should be grateful to Mark," she would say, her voice dripping with condescendence. "You're living a comfortable life because of him." George, though not as vocal as Linda, had his way of belittling me with his old-fashioned views on women. My relationship with Mark deteriorated as he increasingly sided with his parents. Any attempt to discuss our issues was met with indifference or blame. "They are old, you need to be more understanding," he would dismissively say. Our hopes of having children faded with each passing year, further straining our relationship. The pressure from Linda and George about grandchildren was relentless. Yet Mark remained indifferent, absorbed in his own world. Sarah, my neighbor, and her husband David were my only solace. They knew the real story behind the picture-perfect facade of my marriage. Sarah, having gone through her own struggles, became a confidant and a source of strength. As I lay in the hospital bed, reflecting on these memories, Mark's voice brought me back to reality. Anna, you need to do this for us, for the family, he pleaded over the phone. But something within me had snapped. No longer could I be the submissive wife, the victim of their twisted family dynamics. I hung up the phone, a sense of determination building within me. They had crossed a line, and it was time for them to face the consequences. I was going to fight back. This was not just about me anymore. It was about standing up against the injustice that had governed my life for far too long. In the sterile calm of the hospital room, my thoughts were a turbulent storm. I grappled with the pain, not just from my injuries, but from the betrayal of those I once called family. As the sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor, Sarah walked in, her face etched with concern. "Anna, how are you feeling?" Sarah asked, sitting beside my bed. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes betrayed her anger. "I've been better," I replied, trying to muster a smile. "What did the police say?" Sarah's expression hardened. "They initially bought the accidental fall story, but I told them what I saw. Linda driving out of the garage like a bat out of hell, right before I found you on the ground." I clenched my fists, anger boiling within me. "Mark wants me to lie, to protect them." She reached out, squeezing my hand. "You can't let them get away with this, Anna. It's not just about the accident. It's years of manipulation and control. This is your chance to break free." Her words resonated with me. For years I had endured Linda's demeaning comments and George's dismissive attitude, always with Mark's passive compliance. It was a cycle of control and humiliation, a never-ending test of my patience and resilience. As Sarah and I talked, a plan began to form in my mind, a plan not just for justice, but for retribution. It was time Linda and her family faced the consequences of their actions. The next day, a police officer came to take my statement. I recounted the events leading up to the accident, the pain, the betrayal, and Mark's desperate plea to cover it up. The officer listened intently, jotting down notes. "We have enough to bring them in for questioning," he said after I finished. "We'll need to investigate further, but your testimony is crucial." I nodded, a sense of empowerment washing over me. This was more than just a legal process. It was the first step in reclaiming my life. As the days passed, my resolve only grew stronger. Sarah visited regularly, updating me on the investigation's progress. She spoke of how the community was rallying around me, offering support and expressing their outrage at Linda's actions. I also learned that David had been reviewing footage from their home security camera, which faced our driveway. He was hopeful it might have captured something useful. This news sparked a glimmer of hope in me. If we could prove Linda intentionally hit me, it would be the undeniable evidence we needed. With each passing day, my physical strength returned, but it was the growing sense of justice that truly healed me. I was no longer the silent sufferer, enduring in the shadows. I was a woman wronged, ready to fight back and expose the vile nature of those who had oppressed me. The small room at the police station felt colder than usual as I waited for the detective. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cocktail of anger and anticipation. The door opened, and Detective Martinez walked in, his expression serious. "We've reviewed the footage from your neighbor's security camera," he began, placing a file on the table. "It clearly shows Linda's car hitting you. It's unmistakable." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a burning desire for justice. "What happens now?" I asked. "We're bringing them in for questioning today. Your husband, too. They'll have to answer for this," Detective Martinez replied. As I left the police station, a plan was forming in my head. It wasn't enough for them to be merely exposed. They had to feel the weight of their actions. Later that day, Sarah called me with an update. "The police took Linda, George, and Mark for questioning. The whole neighborhood is talking about it. They can't believe what Linda did." The news spread like wildfire, igniting a mixture of shock and disdain from those who had once respected the family. But for me, it was a vindication of years of silent suffering. I lay in my hospital bed that night, imagining Linda's face as she was confronted with her actions. The once formidable woman, now cornered by her own deceit. It was a scene I had played out in my mind countless times, each replay a small victory. But it was not just Linda who needed to face the music. Mark's betrayal was a wound that cut deep. He had chosen his parents over me, over truth and decency. He had to understand the gravity of his choice. I was discharged from the hospital a few days later, my body still aching, but my spirit unbroken. Sarah and David were waiting for me, their faces a mix of concern and determination. Anna, we're with you in this. Whatever you need, David said, his voice firm. Thank you, I replied, feeling a sense of solidarity I hadn't felt in years. That evening, as I sat in Sarah's living room, we watched the news. The story of my accident and the ensuing investigation had made the local headlines. Linda, George, and Mark's faces were plastered across the screen, their reputations tarnished. It was a surreal moment seeing my private turmoil turned public spectacle, but there was no sympathy in my heart for them. This was the beginning of their downfall, a downfall they had brought upon themselves. The atmosphere in the interrogation room was thick with tension. Linda, George, and Mark sat across from me, their faces a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. Detective Martinez sat beside me, his presence a reassuring reminder of the justice system at work. You understand why you're here, Detective Martinez began, addressing the trio. The evidence is clear. Linda, you hit Anna with your car and then fled the scene. George, you were a witness and chose to stay silent. And Mark, you tried to cover it all up. Linda's face was a mask of defiance, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. It was an accident, she said, her voice quivering slightly. I never meant to hit her. George remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table, while Mark's face was flushed with embarrassment and guilt. Mom, why didn't you just stop? Why did you run? Mark's voice cracked, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. I looked at them, my heart hardened by years of mistreatment. You could have killed me, Linda, and all you cared about was saving yourselves. Linda's composure finally broke, tears streaming down her face. I was scared, I panicked, she sobbed. George finally spoke, his voice low. We were wrong. We never should have lied. Detective Martinez turned to Mark. And you, Mark, you tried to manipulate the story, even asking your wife to lie for you. How do you justify that? Mark's response was barely audible. I don't know. I wanted to protect my parents. I felt a surge of disgust and pity for Mark. He had chosen his parents' side over truth and justice over his own wife. You didn't just betray me, Mark. You betrayed everything we ever had, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The detective nodded, his expression solemn. You will all face charges for your actions. This is a serious matter. As we left the room, I felt a sense of closure. They had been exposed for who they truly were. Linda, a coward hiding behind her tears, George, a silent accomplice to his wife's crime, and Mark, a son so blinded by loyalty that he lost sight of what was right. The world outside seemed different as I stepped out of the police station. I had confronted my past, and now it was time to build my future. The air felt fresher, the sky more open. I was free from the chains of Linda and Mark's oppressive control. Sarah and David were waiting for me, their faces a mix of concern and pride. You were incredible in there, Sarah said, her voice warm. Thank you, I replied, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for their unwavering support. In the following weeks, the legal proceedings against Linda, George, and Mark began. The news of their arraignment spread through our community, eliciting mixed reactions. Some expressed shock, others disappointment, but for me, it was a validation of my struggles. During this time, I stayed with Sarah and David. They provided not just a roof over my head, but a nurturing environment that allowed me to heal. Their kindness was a stark contrast to the years of cold indifference I had experienced with Mark and his parents. One evening, as we sat in Sarah's living room, David broke the news. The prosecutor's office called. Linda and George are looking at significant charges, Mark too for his part in the cover-up. I nodded, feeling a bittersweet sense of satisfaction. They were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But what about you, Anna? Sarah asked, her eyes full of concern. What will you do now? I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'm filing for divorce. I can't be with someone who chose his parents over me, even in a situation as grave as this. Sarah squeezed my hand, her support unspoken but deeply felt. The divorce proceedings were swift, largely due to Mark's guilt and the overwhelming evidence against him. I received a significant settlement, a small consolation for the years of emotional turmoil. With the settlement, I decided to start anew. I rented a small apartment, modest but mine alone. It was a fresh start, a place where I could rebuild my life on my own terms. Sarah and David were instrumental in this new chapter of my life. David, who owned a small business, offered me a job. "You've got skills and experience, Anna. We'd be lucky to have you," he said, his offer genuine and heartfelt. I accepted, eager to reclaim my independence and step into a world I had been shut out from for so long. As I settled into my new job and life, I found a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded me for years. Working alongside Sarah and David, I rediscovered parts of myself that I had long forgotten. I was no longer the downtrodden wife of Mark, but Anna, a woman with her own identity and strength. Months had passed since the trial began, and the day of the verdict finally arrived. As I sat in the courtroom, I felt a sense of finality. Linda, George, and Mark sat on the other side, their faces etched with anxiety and regret. The judge's voice echoed in the solemn room. "In light of the evidence presented, this court finds Linda and George guilty of hit-and-run and obstruction of justice. Mark is found guilty of aiding in the cover-up." The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the judge pronounced the sentences. Linda and George received prison sentences, while Mark was given community service and probation. Their faces crumbled as the reality of their situation sank in. After the verdict, I stood outside the courthouse, the sun warming my face. Sarah and David joined me, their presence a comforting reminder of the support that had carried me through. "Justice has been served," Sarah said, her voice tinged with relief. "Yes, but at what cost?" I mused, reflecting on the years lost and the pain endured. The news of their sentencing spread quickly. Linda, once a respected figure in our community, was now a convicted felon. George, her silent accomplice, shared her fate. And Mark, my once beloved husband, was reduced to a man who had betrayed his wife to protect his deceitful parents. In the weeks that followed, I felt a shift in myself. The weight of the past began to lift, and in its place grew a sense of empowerment. My life, once defined by the shadows of Linda and Mark's control, was now mine to shape. Working at David's company brought new challenges and joys. I thrived in the environment, my confidence growing with each passing day. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, was by my side, encouraging me to embrace this new chapter. But the greatest change came when I least expected it. At a company event, I met Thomas, a colleague of David's. He was kind, respectful, and most importantly, he saw me for who I was, not for my past. Our friendship blossomed into romance, and within a year, we were married. It was a simple ceremony, a celebration of new beginnings and healed hearts. Thomas knew of my past, of the pain and betrayal, but it only strengthened our bond. As I stood by Thomas's side, looking into his loving eyes, I realized that this was what true partnership looked like. It was built on mutual respect, support, and understanding, everything my marriage to Mark lacked. A year had passed since the trial, and life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Thomas and I had moved into a cozy house, a place we could truly call our own. The scars of my past with Linda, George, and Mark had begun to fade, replaced by the love and contentment that filled my days. One evening, as Thomas and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with a gentle smile. "You know, Anna, I admire your strength. What you went through, it's unimaginable, but here you are, stronger and happier." I leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I couldn't have done it without friends like Sarah and David. And without you," I replied, my heart full of gratitude. Our conversation drifted to the future, to dreams and plans yet to unfold. The pain and drama of the past were no longer chains that held me back, but stepping stones that had led me to this moment of tranquility. Occasionally I would hear news of Linda, George, and Mark. Linda and George were serving their sentences, a consequence of their actions that they had to live with every day. Mark, on the other hand, had struggled to rebuild his life. The community's knowledge of his betrayal had left him isolated and remorseful. Though I had moved on, there was a part of me that found a bitter satisfaction in their downfall. They had reaped what they had sown, a fitting karma for their deeds. As I reflected on my journey, I realized that my story was one of transformation. I had gone from being a victim of manipulation and deceit to a woman who stood up for herself, fought for justice, and reclaimed her life. Now, surrounded by love and support, I was ready to face whatever the future held. The challenges and heartaches of my past had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. I was Anna, a survivor, a woman who had found her happiness despite the odds. The story of my past would always be a part of me, but it was the story of my present and future that I was most excited to write. A story of love, resilience, and newfound joy. I never imagined a single sentence could shatter my world. Evelyn, give Nathan a child, or we'll push for a divorce. The words from Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, echoed in my head, each syllable a hammer strike to my heart. I'm Evelyn, a 32-year-old former marketing specialist turned housewife. My life story took a pivotal turn when I met Nathan, back when I was thriving in the corporate jungle. He, with his occasional charming smile amidst serious business meetings, had unknowingly cast a spell on me. I remember gathering every ounce of courage to ask him out, only to be met with a bittersweet rejection. He had a girlfriend. But fate played its hand. A month later, he stood before me, single and willing. He confessed that my upfront confession had stirred something in him. His relationship was already on rocky grounds, and my bold move was the nudge he needed. I felt a tinge of guilt, wondering if I was the reason for their breakup. Nathan, however, reassured me with his usual calm demeanor. Evelyn, it was bound to end. You just made me realize it sooner. Our relationship blossomed, and 3 years later, we were exchanging vows. Nathan had one request. He wanted children, and he wanted me to be a dedicated housewife. The timing felt right. I was burnt out from my toxic job. So with dreams of a blissful domestic life, I stepped into my new role. Initially, the transition was like living a dream. Our days were filled with laughter and love. I savored every moment, every shared meal, every cozy night in. The proximity to my in-laws, just a 10-minute walk, initially seemed daunting, but my fears were unfounded. They welcomed me with open arms, especially Mrs. Whitmore. She was the epitome of warmth, always ready to lend a hand or share wise advice. "You're the daughter I never had," she'd say with a tender smile. But as years rolled by without the pitter-patter of little feet, the warmth began to wane. Mrs. Whitmore's demeanor shifted so drastically, it felt like dealing with a stranger. She began to drop by unannounced, each visit laced with veiled criticisms and not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren. The pressure mounted when Nathan's attitude towards starting a family shifted. In our early days, his desire for children was clear, but as time passed, his enthusiasm fizzled out. He'd brush off my attempts to discuss the matter with excuses, tiredness, work, or his latest video game obsession. I confided in Mrs. Whitmore, hoping for some understanding, but empathy was far from what I received. Her once supportive words turned into relentless pressure. "A grandchild is a wife's duty," she'd say, her tone laced with accusation. The stress was unbearable. Nathan and I decided to seek fertility treatments, a glimmer of hope in our strained relationship. But this step only further alienated Nathan. He withdrew into his world, leaving me to face the treatments and his mother's growing hostility alone. One evening, after another lonely day, I confronted Nathan. The frustration and loneliness poured out in a torrent of words. "We need to talk about us, about our family," I pleaded. His response was a cold shrug. "I don't see the rush, Evelyn. Let's just let things happen." But things weren't just happening, and my patience was wearing thin. I yearned for a change, a break from this cycle of disappointment and loneliness. Little did I know, the change was closer than I thought, and it would start with a revelation that would turn everything on its head. The months following were a cascade of unspoken words and mounting tensions. Mrs. Whitmore's visits became more frequent and oppressive, each one a stark reminder of our childless state. "Evelyn, time isn't on your side," she'd chide, her voice sharp as a knife. It felt like she relished each jab, each veiled insult. Nathan's disinterest in our predicament only added fuel to the fire. Our conversations about starting a family dwindled to nothingness, replaced by silence or curt exchanges. The man I once saw as my partner in life now felt like a stranger sharing my home. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One evening, as I was tidying up, I stumbled upon a stash of receipts, evidence of Nathan's lavish spending on gaming and nights out. It was a slap in the face, a blatant disregard for our shared future. I confronted him, holding the receipts like a verdict. "Nathan, what is all this? When did our dreams become so unimportant to you?" He just scoffed, his eyes barely leaving his computer screen. "Dreams? What dreams, Evelyn? The ones you had? Not mine, certainly." His words stung, but I persisted. We talked about this, Nathan. A family, a future together. He finally turned, his eyes cold. That was then. This is now. Things change, Evelyn. I felt a chasm opening between us, one filled with broken promises and unmet expectations. My efforts to bridge it were met with indifference or annoyance. The man I married was no longer the partner I envisioned in building a family. As the days turned to weeks, the situation at home became unbearable. Nathan's once rare outbursts became frequent, his temper short. I walked on eggshells, dreading his next explosion of frustration. Mrs. Whitmore's visits grew more confrontational. She seemed to derive some twisted satisfaction from my misery. Maybe you're not trying hard enough, Evelyn. A real woman knows how to keep her man happy and give him children. Her words were like venom, and I struggled to maintain my composure. I'm doing everything I can, Mrs. Whitmore. It's not as simple as you make it out to be. But she was relentless, her presence in our home a constant reminder of my perceived failure. The pressure was suffocating, the judgment inescapable. The fertility treatments, once a beacon of hope, became a source of despair. Each visit to the clinic was a reminder of our failing attempts. Nathan's support was non-existent. He accompanied me more out of obligation than desire. During one particularly harrowing visit, the doctor suggested we consider other options, perhaps even counseling. But Nathan dismissed it outright. Counseling? For what? This is just a waste of time and money. I felt abandoned, my dreams slipping away like sand through my fingers. The loneliness was crippling, the silence in our home deafening. The man I once loved was now the source of my deepest pain. In the midst of this turmoil, a shocking discovery turned my world upside down. A routine checkup revealed the unexpected. I was pregnant. The news should have been a joyous revelation, but it felt like a cruel irony. I kept the pregnancy a secret, unsure of what to do or how Nathan would react. The joy of motherhood was overshadowed by the reality of my crumbling marriage. The thought of bringing a child into this toxic environment was terrifying. As I grappled with my new reality, I realized something had to change. I couldn't continue in this cycle of despair and loneliness. A decision had to be made, for the sake of my unborn child and my own sanity. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let this continue. The time for change was now. The revelation of my pregnancy was a secret I guarded closely, a flickering light in the growing darkness of my marriage. But before I could even process this news, another storm was brewing on the horizon. It was a bleak Tuesday morning when Nathan, unusually present at breakfast, dropped a bombshell. "I quit my job," he said nonchalantly, his eyes fixed on his phone. I stared at him, my fork suspended midair. "You did what? Nathan, why would you quit without discussing it with me first?" He shrugged, disinterested. "I wasn't happy there. Besides, it's not like it matters to you." His casual dismissal of such a crucial matter left me reeling. Our financial stability was now in jeopardy, and yet he seemed utterly unconcerned. The responsibility of our future, and now a child, weighed heavily on me. As days turned into weeks, Nathan's joblessness became the new normal. He spent his days glued to his computer screen, immersed in virtual worlds, while I struggled with the reality of our situation. One afternoon, as I was sorting through bills and trying to budget our dwindling savings, Nathan burst into the room. His face was flushed with anger, an ominous sign. "Evelyn, what's this about a charge for craft supplies? You know we need to be saving money." I looked up, bewildered. "It's just a few dollars, Nathan. Crafting helps me relax." His reaction was explosive. "Relax? We're on the edge of financial ruin, and you're thinking about relaxing?" His words stung, but I stood my ground. "We wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't quit your job without a plan." The argument escalated, with Nathan deflecting every concern with accusations and blame. "You're just a freeloader, Evelyn. You don't understand what it means to earn a living." I was aghast at his audacity. Here I was, carrying our child, trying to keep our life afloat, and he dared to call me a freeloader. The irony was bitter. As I lay in bed that night, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't bring my child into a world of resentment and anger. I had to protect my unborn child from the toxic environment that our home had become. The next morning, with a steely resolve, I confronted Nathan. "We need to talk about our future, Nathan. This can't go on." His response was a sneer. What future, Evelyn? You think I don't know you're unhappy? Go ahead, leave if you want. His words were a catalyst. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared in secret. Fine. Let's end this charade. Nathan's arrogance faltered for a moment as he looked at the papers. You're serious? Deadly, I replied, my voice unwavering. He scanned the document, his facade crumbling. You can't do this, Evelyn. Think about what you're doing. I have, Nathan. I've thought about it more than you ever did about us. He signed the papers with a shaky hand, a mixture of disbelief and resignation on his face. As he left the room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was the first step towards a new life for me and my child. But even as I braced myself for the challenges ahead, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. The battle was far from over, and I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with more obstacles. But for the sake of my child, I was ready to face them head-on. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried when the true extent of our financial ruin came to light. Nathan's carefree spending and lack of savings had left us with barely a cushion. And now, with the divorce proceedings underway, the grim reality of our situation became apparent. I was sitting at the kitchen table, poring over accounts and legal documents, when Nathan walked in, his demeanor unusually calm. So, how are we splitting the assets? He asked, a hint of greed in his tone. I looked up, masking my contempt. There's not much to split, Nathan. Your spending saw to that. He scoffed, leaning against the doorway. Come on, Evelyn. What about your savings? The money you had before we got married. A cold laugh escaped my lips. You really think you're entitled to that? That money is mine, Nathan. I saved it long before I met you. His face contorted in anger. That's not fair, Evelyn. We're married. What's yours is mine. I stood up, my resolve firm. Not anymore. The savings are not part of the marital assets, and as for the condo, it's in my name. I bought it before we married. Nathan's face drained of color. You can't do this to me. I have rights. But I felt a surge of bitter satisfaction seeing him so powerless, a stark contrast to the domineering man he had been. Your rights ended when you signed those papers. You have no claim to my property or my savings. The reality of his situation seemed to sink in. His bluster faded, replaced by a dawning realization of his impending destitution. In the following weeks, the condo sale was finalized, adding to my financial security. Nathan, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of his actions. He moved back in with his parents, a defeated man. As I packed up my belongings, a sense of liberation washed over me. I was free from the toxic marriage, free to start anew. But the greatest triumph was yet to come. I moved back to my parents' home, their support unwavering as I navigated through my pregnancy. They were overjoyed at the prospect of a grandchild, their love and care a stark contrast to the coldness I had endured. The day I gave birth to Leo was the day I truly understood the meaning of unconditional love. Holding my son in my arms, I made a silent vow to protect him, to give him the life he deserved. Nathan remained blissfully ignorant of his son's birth. I kept it a secret, knowing that revealing it would only invite chaos into our lives. It was a decision I made for Leo's sake, a shield against the toxicity of his father's family. As I settled into my new role as a single mother, I found strength I never knew I had. The craft store I frequented offered me a managerial position, a chance to rebuild my career and provide for Leo. Life had come full circle, and as I looked at my son, I knew that the hardest battles were behind us. We were on a path to healing and happiness, a future bright with possibilities. But fate had one more twist in store. One day, as I was arranging displays in the store, the bell chimed, announcing the arrival of customers. I looked up, expecting regular patrons, but instead I saw the last people I ever wanted to encounter again, Nathan and Mrs. Whitmore. Their presence was like a dark cloud, a reminder of a past I had fought hard to leave behind. But I was no longer the same woman they had tormented. I was stronger, braver, and I had Leo to fight for. The confrontation was inevitable, but I was ready. I was ready to protect my son, to defend the life we had built. The stage was set for the final showdown, and this time I was not going to back down. The air in the craft store grew thick with tension as Nathan and Mrs. Whitmore stepped in. Their eyes roamed around, finally settling on me with a mixture of surprise and, in Nathan's case, a hint of regret. "Evelyn, running a little shop now?" How quaint, Mrs. Whitmore sneered, her voice dripping with condescension. I forced a polite smile, standing my ground. It's more fulfilling than you might think. How can I help you? Nathan shuffled uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. We heard about the divorce. I suppose congratulations are in order. The bitterness in his voice was palpable, but I didn't flinch. Thank you, Nathan. It was for the best. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. For the best, you say? Leaving my son in shambles? Claiming all the assets for yourself? I met her gaze steadily. I only claimed what was rightfully mine. Nathan knows that. Nathan's face reddened, a mix of anger and shame. Evelyn, about the savings and the condo. I cut him off, my tone firm. We've been over this, Nathan. The matter is closed. His frustration was evident, but he was powerless. The realization that he had lost everything, not just the marriage, but also any financial security, seemed to hit him hard. Mrs. Whitmore, not one to be easily deterred, shifted her tactics. Well, then, let's discuss the real reason we're here. Her words piqued my curiosity, but I remained cautious. And what would that be? With a twisted smile, she dropped the bombshell. We know about the child, Evelyn. Your son, our grandson. The room spun for a moment as I processed her words. How did they find out about Leo? I had been so careful. Nathan's eyes lit up with a mixture of surprise and something akin to triumph. So it's true, then? You were pregnant during the divorce? I regained my composure, facing them head on. Yes, I was, but that changes nothing between us. Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a mix of greed and determination. It changes everything. That child is a Whitmore. He belongs with us. Her audacity was astounding. Leo is my son. He has nothing to do with you or Nathan. Nathan, finding his voice, joined in. Evelyn, be reasonable. He's my son, too. I have rights. I shook my head, disbelief and anger swirling within me. You lost any rights when you signed those papers and walked out of our lives. The argument escalated, their demands growing more outrageous. They spoke of custody, of visitation rights, of integrating Leo into the Whitmore family. Each word was a strike against the peaceful life I had built for my son. But I stood firm, my resolve unshaken. You will not lay a finger on my son. This discussion is over. As they left, their threats and accusations lingered in the air. I knew this wasn't the end. They would be back, and I needed to be prepared. I had fought too hard to give up now. Leo was my world, and I would do whatever it took to protect him from the toxicity of the Whitmores. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to defend my son at all costs. The Whitmores had underestimated me once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The threat of the Whitmores loomed over my newfound peace like a dark cloud. Their unannounced visit to the craft store was just the beginning, a prelude to a battle I had hoped to avoid. Yet, in the depths of my heart, I knew it was inevitable. They would not relinquish their claim on Leo without a fight. Weeks passed with a deceptive calm. Each day I juggled managing the store and caring for Leo, all the while keeping a vigilant eye out for any sign of Nathan or Mrs. Whitmore. My parents, aware of the situation, were a constant source of strength and support. Then, one fateful afternoon, as I was arranging a new shipment of fabrics, the bell chimed. My heart sank as I looked up to see Nathan and Mrs. Whitmore enter, their faces set in grim determination. Without preamble, Mrs. Whitmore launched into her tirade. Evelyn, we've given this a lot of thought. It's only fair that we have custody of Leo for part of the time. He needs to know his father's family. Nathan nodded in agreement, his eyes avoiding mine. Evelyn, it's the right thing to do. Leo is my son, too. I felt a flare of anger at their audacity. Right thing? Since when did either of you care about what's right? You abandoned us, remember? Mrs. Whitmore's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Oh, Evelyn, always playing the victim. It's time you faced reality. Leo belongs with us. Their words were like venom, but I refused to let them see me falter. Leo is my son. He will not be part of your twisted games. Nathan stepped forward, a hint of desperation in his voice. Evelyn, please, I'm his father. I deserve to be in his life. I met his gaze, my voice unwavering. You lost that right when you chose your selfishness over our family. Leo will have nothing to do with you. The tension in the air was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. They were not going to back down, and neither was I. This was a fight for my son's future, and I was ready to go to any lengths to protect him. As they left, their threats hanging heavy in the air, I knew this was far from over. They would return, perhaps with legal reinforcements next time. But I was not the same woman they had once manipulated and belittled. I was a mother, a fighter, and I would do whatever it took to keep Leo safe from their toxic influence. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready. I had faced their worst and survived. Now, it was time to show them that I was not to be underestimated. For Leo's sake, I would fight with everything I had. The Whitmores had awakened a strength in me they never knew existed, and I was prepared to use it to protect my son at all costs. The days following the confrontation at the craft store were tense. I fortified myself for the impending legal battle, consulting with a lawyer to safeguard Leo's future. My parents, ever supportive, reassured me of their unwavering backing. One late afternoon, while I was tending to the store, the bell chimed. My heart sank as I saw Nathan and Mrs. Whitmore enter, their faces twisted with a resolve that spelled trouble. This time, they were not alone. A stern-looking man, presumably their lawyer, accompanied them. "Evelyn, we've come to a decision," Mrs. Whitmore declared, her voice laced with a cold finality. "We're filing for partial custody of Leo. It's only fair." Nathan, standing beside her, added, "It's not just about us. Leo deserves to know his father." Their presence, their demands, it was all a grotesque déjà vu. But this time, something in me snapped. The fear and hesitation that once held me back evaporated, replaced by a fierce protectiveness. "No," I said firmly. "You won't drag my son into your twisted world. I won't let you." Whitmore scoffed. "Don't be foolish, Evelyn. You can't keep him from us." Before I could reply, the door swung open. My parents walked in, their arrival unexpected but immensely comforting. My father's stern gaze met Nathan's, an unspoken warning in his eyes. "What's going on here?" my father asked, his voice steady and authoritative. Nathan faltered under his gaze, but Mrs. Whitmore was undeterred. "We're here to claim our rights to Leo." My mother stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You have no rights here. You lost them the day you turned your backs on Evelyn and her child." The lawyer began to interject, but my father cut him off. "I think you should leave. This matter can be settled legally, not by intimidation or coercion." As the tension escalated, I glanced at Leo, playing in the corner, blissfully unaware of the storm around him. My resolve hardened. I would not let their toxic presence touch his life. Suddenly, Nathan lunged towards Leo, his desperation clear. "I just want to see my son." But before he could reach him, my father intervened, his police training kicking in. With a swift move, he restrained Nathan, his years of experience evident. Mrs. Whitmore shrieked, "Assault! We'll have you arrested for this." My father looked at her, undaunted. "I'm protecting my grandson. If you continue this, I'll be forced to involve the authorities." Defeated and realizing they were outmatched, Nathan and Mrs. Whitmore left, their threats and bluster deflating as they exited the door. In the aftermath, my parents stood by me, their presence a bulwark against the chaos. As I hugged Leo, a sense of peace enveloped me. The battle was over, at least for now. I had stood up to the Whitmores, protected my son, and in doing so found a strength I never knew I had. The days that followed were a return to normalcy, the shadow of the Whitmores slowly fading into a distant memory. Leo's laughter filled the house, a balm to the wounds of the past. In time, I realized that the best revenge was not in defeating the Whitmores, but in building a life full of love and happiness with Leo, a life they could never taint. We had emerged from the ruins stronger and more united, a testament to the enduring power of love and family. And as I watched Leo grow, his bright eyes full of curiosity and joy, I knew that no matter what the future held, we were ready to face it together. The Whitmores had tried to break us, but in the end they only made us stronger. "You're not my real daughter," my mother snapped, her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I stood there frozen, my backpack slipping off my shoulder and crashing to the floor. Those 10 words changed everything in an instant. Just this morning my life had seemed so normal. My caring dad making pancakes, my mom helping me pick out a shirt for the school day. Now their affection seemed like an illusion, shattered by my mother's harsh confession. I searched her face, hoping to find some hint of regret or softening in her icy blue eyes. Instead, I found only resentment simmering behind her glare. What do you mean?" I stammered. "Of course Don't," she cut me off sharply. "Daniel may have been naive enough to believe I'd ever give birth to an ungrateful brat like you, but the truth had to come out eventually. Daniel, my dad. The man who had tucked me in every night with a kiss on the forehead, who had cheered louder than anyone at my soccer games, who had taught me how to ride a bike in our cul-de-sac, laughing each time I wobbled and fell. "Why are you saying this?" I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes. "Dad loves me. I know he does." Karen scoffed. "You know nothing, you stupid girl. The moment your father naively presented you to me as our daughter, I knew you didn't belong to me. I went along with his charade for years, but I won't any longer." My hands trembled, and I felt the room start to spin. None of this made any sense. Just yesterday, Dad had proudly hung my straight-A report card on our refrigerator and given me a big congratulatory hug. And now, this? Does Dad know? I asked weakly, grasping for any foothold of understanding amidst the free-fall of confusion and pain. Karen straightened up, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Of course not. As far as Daniel's concerned, you're his precious little girl. I'll let him keep believing his fantasy a little while longer. But you and I know the truth now." I shook my head in disbelief, hot tears spilling down my cheeks. My real mom, my only mom, was renouncing me as her daughter. The secure world I'd known had evaporated in an instant, destroyed by 5 small words. I wanted to melt through the floor and disappear. Instead, I met Karen's icy glare, my hands balling into fists. "You're lying. You have to be." She stepped towards me, her smile vanishing. "Still clinging to your pathetic little fantasy? Let me make myself clear, girl. I agreed to play along as your mother to humor Daniel, but I never wanted you as my daughter, and now that you're older, it's time you learned your place." Her words battered me like a hurricane, each one intent on destroying any last shred of belonging or identity I still clung to. "Please," I choked out through sobs. "Please take it back." "The truth hurts, doesn't it?" Karen replied coolly, "But lies will hurt much more in the end." With that, she turned and strode out of the kitchen, leaving me shaking amidst the wreckage of the life I thought I knew. I wanted to curl up and disappear, or else run after her screaming and force her to admit it was all a sick joke. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and fled out the front door, my vision blurred with tears. I had to find Dad. He would fix this. He had to. I ran down the street, turning onto the path through Wilson Park. Dad always walked this way home from the train station after work. I spotted his familiar figure in the distance, tall and lumbering in his business suit. "Dad!" I cried out, sprinting towards him. He turned, brow furrowing in concern as I collided with him, burying my face in his chest. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked gently. "Mom, she... I choked on the words, the wound still too raw and bewildering to even speak. Dad wrapped his arms around me, hugging me close as I sobbed into his shirt. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll figure this out together." But even cradled in his strong, comforting arms, part of me wondered whether we'd ever be able to piece our family back together again. Karen's words had cracked the very foundation we stood on. There was no going back now. Everything had changed. The next morning, I hesitated outside the kitchen, bracing myself before going inside. After fleeing from Karen's cruel revelation yesterday, Dad and I had spent hours talking in the park. He had listened patiently, promising we'd get through this together as a family. But while his reassurance soothed me, doubt still gnawed at my heart. I took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. Karen stood at the counter, scrambling eggs like it was any other morning. Dad sat at the table reading his tablet, hair still wet from the shower. "Morning, sweetheart," he said warmly as I slid into my seat. Karen didn't look up, continuing to scrape at the eggs in stony silence. Dad set down his tablet, smiling. "So your soccer team has a big game today, right, Marley? Think you'll kick the winning goal again?" "Oh, maybe," I mumbled, picking at my sleeve. Karen dumped the eggs onto a plate and banged it down in front of me. "She'd be lucky if she even makes the team at this rate," she snapped. "With her lack of skill, she'll be riding the bench all season." I recoiled like her words were daggers, plunged straight into my confidence. Just yesterday, Dad had been telling me what a talented player I was. Hearing Karen belittle me so casually knotted my stomach. Oblivious, Dad chuckled. "Oh, Karen, she led the league in scoring last season. I know she'll shine today." Karen said nothing, her face stone. The contrast between Dad's warm praise and her cutting remarks made my head spin. It was like 2 different people inhabiting one body, the loving mother I knew, and this cold, cruel stranger. At school, I drifted through the day in a fog, unable to focus. By last period, my nerves were frayed. As I sat down in English class, my friend Lily slid into the desk beside me. "You ready for the big game today?" she asked, bumping my shoulder playfully. I made a huge Go Marley poster to hold up when you score. Despite my unease, I smiled. Lily had been my best friend since 3rd grade. Her bubbly warmth calmed my jangled nerves. "Thanks," I said, "though I don't know if I'll score any goals today." Lily waved her hand dramatically. "Oh, please, superstar, you got this. Just focus on fun. All that matters is we have each other's backs." Her sincere encouragement lifted some of the weight from my shoulders. With Lily, things were so easy. Not like at home, where each word hid an undertow of resentment and deceit. After school, Lily met me at my locker, practically vibrating with excitement. "It's game time, Chica. Let's do this." Despite everything, I grinned. Lily's enthusiasm was infectious. As we walked out to the field, she kept up a constant stream of chatter and pep talks. With the whistle, the game began in a blur of action. My muscles carried me through the familiar motions almost on autopilot, but my mother's words kept intruding, throwing me off balance. "You don't belong. You're not my daughter." I missed an easy pass, the ball skidding under my foot. Groaning internally, I raced after it. "Come on, slowpoke, you got this." Lily yelled from the sideline. Gritting my teeth, I centered myself and regained control. I wasn't going to let Karen derail me that easily. As the game wore on, I found my focus. The thrill of the competition helped me tune out the doubts needling my mind. And when a pass slipped through the defense right to my feet, I struck without hesitation, driving the ball into the net. As cheers erupted, I felt that familiar glow of victory bloom in my chest. Maybe things weren't as broken as they felt. With time, even the most damaged pieces could be mended or cast aside to build something new. Dad and I were halfway through eating the pizza we had picked up on the way home from my soccer game when the phone rang. "Oh, Karen must be working late again," Dad said, wiping tomato sauce from his mouth as he stood. "I'll grab it in the other room. Be right back, sweet pea." I nodded, taking another slice as he left. I was still riding the high of my game-winning goal, pushing aside thoughts of Karen's cruel revelation from yesterday. Dad's voice rumbled from the other room, his tone hushed and urgent. My stomach knotted as I strained to hear what he was saying. A minute later, he hurried back in, his face pale. "That was Dr. Miles," he said, voice tight. "I need to get to the hospital right away." I stood quickly. "What happened?" "Your mother collapsed at work," he said, already moving toward the front door. "Her coworkers found her unconscious in her office." My breath caught in my throat. As much as Karen's words had stung, I couldn't bear the thought of her sick or in danger. "Is she going to be okay?" I asked shakily. "I don't know yet, sweetie. I need you to stay here while I go find out what's happening. I'll call as soon as I can." Dad enveloped me in a fierce, brief hug, his fear palpable. Then he rushed out into the night. Alone in the kitchen, I sank into a chair, my slice of pizza forgotten. My thoughts swirled dizzyingly between Karen's coldness and concern for her well-being. As the hours ticked by, the silence in the house grew oppressive. I paced the halls, phone clutched in my sweaty hand as I waited for Dad's call, but the screen remained dark. Finally, footsteps outside signaled his return. I hurried to open the door, questions spilling out. "Is Mom okay? What did the doctors say?" Dad's expression stopped me cold. His eyes were red and hollow, like something vital had been extinguished within him. "Dad?" I whispered. "What happened?" He sank down onto the couch heavily, head in his hands. "It was a brain aneurysm," he said, voice cracking. "By the time I got there, she was already gone." The words dropped like a bomb, blasting my world apart. I swayed on my feet. No, that can't be right." Dad's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Feeling numb, I sat beside him on the couch. He wrapped me in his arms, and we clung to each other desperately amidst the wreckage of our shattered lives. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he choked out. "I know how much you loved her." But instead of grief, my mind swirled with confusion. Karen hadn't loved me like a mother. She had made that brutally clear. So why did this loss feel so heavy and disorienting? Over Dad's shoulder, I stared at the pictures lining the fireplace mantel. Karen smiling next to me at my 5th birthday party. Karen cheering at my dance recital. Karen and I baking holiday cookies together, flour on our noses. Those captured memories blurred as fresh tears filled my eyes. However, she had really felt Karen was the only mother I had ever known, and now she was gone, leaving questions that could never be answered. Dad and I clung to each other long into the night, two castaways adrift on a sea of anguish and uncertainty. The mother I had thought I knew was gone, but the truth she had callously unearthed lived on, cracking the very bedrock of my life. Nothing would ever be the same. In the weeks after Karen's death, a heavy silence blanketed the house. Dad drifted through the days like a ghost, rarely speaking. At night, I often woke to the muffled sounds of him crying. With Karen gone, it felt like the bones of our family had been hollowed out, leaving behind only a fragile shell. I struggled to reconcile my grief over losing the mother I knew with the bitterness of her final words. One evening, about a month after the funeral, Dad called me into the living room. He sat hunched on the couch, dark circles under his eyes. "Marley, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something." He took a shaky breath. "With your mother gone, I can't give you the care you need right now." I froze. "What do you mean?" Dad avoided my gaze. "Your Aunt Samantha told me about a boarding school just a few hours north. It's a nice place. They have counselors to help you adjust, among other services." My heart hammered. A boarding school? Now when we needed each other most? "Dad, no," I pleaded. "I want to stay with you. We can get through this together." He shook his head warily. "I'm doing what's best. Your aunt will take you up this weekend to get settled. A fresh start will be good for you." I fled the room so he wouldn't see my tears, his words echoing after me. A fresh start, without him. True to his word, that Saturday Aunt Samantha arrived to drive me away from the only home I'd ever known. Dad hugged me wordlessly at the door, his red-rimmed eyes saying what his voice could not. The school loomed like a fortress as we pulled up, all cold stone and iron gates. Aunt Samantha gave me a brisk hug. "Focus on your studies here. It's for the best." Then she drove away, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with my suitcase. My room was small and plain, the walls an icy gray. My roommate, a tall girl named Riley, gave me a cool once-over. "Welcome to purgatory," she said with a sardonic twist of her lips. Classes were rigid and strict. Teachers drilled facts into us for hours, allowing no chatter or distraction. In the eerie quiet of study hall, I scribbled a letter to Dad, pouring my heart out about how much I missed him and hated this soulless place. But weeks passed without a reply. The daily ache of missing him sunk deeper, like a bruise that would not heal. At night, while the other girls slept, I would sometimes creep to the window and stare out at the moon, wondering if Dad was also gazing at that same silvery light missing me. The days trudged by, slow and miserable. My only comfort was dreaming of the day Dad would realize his mistake and come take me home. But when Aunt Samantha visited that winter, she arrived alone, her smile not reaching her eyes. "This place is good for you," she said woodenly when I asked about Dad. "You just focus on settling in." Blinking back tears, I watched her car disappear down the snowy drive, leaving me imprisoned behind these wrought iron bars and stifling rules. The truth stood stark and cold before me. I had lost the only parent I had left, and I was powerless to change anything. But into that bleak void, a spark of defiance took flame in my chest. If no one was coming to save me, I would have to save myself. One way or another, I would take back my life and find the truth Karen had stolen. The days crawled by at a glacial pace in that lifeless school. Every minute felt heavy and interminable. I sleepwalked through classes, meals, and evenings in the dorms, numb to it all. The only thing that kept me putting one foot in front of the other was the flame of defiance burning inside. I promised myself that one day I'd leave this colorless place behind and find the truth my mother had tried to bury. So when Aunt Jenna showed up one dreary afternoon, I hardly dared believe it was real. I hadn't seen her since I was a child, but her warm, familiar smile lifted my spirits like a ray of sunshine piercing the clouds. "Surprise!" she said, sweeping me into a hug. "I've come to take you home." I leaned into her embrace, afraid if I let go this dream would dissolve around me. "Home?" I finally managed. Aunt Jenna planted her hands on her hips. "This dreadful place is no home for you, Marley. You should be back with your father, not locked away here." My heart leaped. "Does Dad know you're here? Is he coming too?" Her face fell slightly. Not yet, but don't you worry, I'll make sure he comes to his senses soon. Her expression hardened with determination. Because it's high time you learned the truth about why you were sent away. I followed her numbly out to her car, hardly daring to hope. As the school faded from view behind us, Jenna reached over and squeezed my hand. I know these months have been terribly difficult and confusing for you, but I promise we'll set things right again soon. I nodded silently, not trusting my voice. After months of darkness, a fragile sprout of hope had taken root inside me. Jenna brought me to her cozy house, where the smell of freshly baked cookies enveloped me like a warm embrace. Over steaming mugs of hot chocolate, she finally revealed the secrets that had shrouded my past in shadow. Your mother, Karen, was not the person she pretended to be. She and your father married quickly before he really knew who she was, and once you came along, things only got worse. Jenna took my hand, her eyes full of compassion. She was cruel to you, Marley. She wanted you out of the picture so she could control your father's money. I sat very still, letting her words sink in. Karen's bitter remarks before her death suddenly made sense. Her rejection had been real, not some hallucination. Jenna sighed. With Karen gone, I hoped your father would regain his senses and bring you home. But I'm afraid Karen's poison runs too deep. He truly believes this boarding school is best for you. I squeezed my eyes shut, holding back tears. To learn Dad had willingly abandoned me cut deeper than any wound. Which is why, Jenna continued, her tone hardening, we must take matters into our own hands. Starting today, we will find the proof we need to open your father's eyes to the truth. She hugged me fiercely. I should have intervened years ago, but I won't fail you again. Whatever it takes, I will help you reunite with your real family. Jenna's revelations shed light on the shadows shrouding my past. The depth of Karen's betrayal took my breath away. But with those secrets exposed, I finally grasped the way forward. With Jenna as my ally, I would take back my life. No more passively accepting the hands I'd been dealt. The time had come to seek justice. Karen had tried to erase me, but she had failed. I was done being silenced and cast aside. My real life was waiting for me, and I intended to claim it. Over the next few weeks, Aunt Jenna and I dove into investigating the truth about my mother. Karen had tried to erase me, but her secrets couldn't stay buried forever. We started by digging through legal documents, looking for any sign of the lies and manipulation Jenna suspected Karen was guilty of. Hour after hour, we pored over property records, account statements, and more, searching for the missing piece that would make sense of it all. Late one night, bleary-eyed from staring at endless columns of numbers, I came across it. A bank statement for an account in Karen's name, with a balance that made my eyes go wide. Aunt Jenna, look! I showed her the statement, hands shaking. She had over $600,000 stashed away, but where did it all come from? Jenna's expression hardened. Just as I feared. That money belongs to you and your father, not Karen. She squeezed my shoulder. We're making progress, Marley. We'll find the rest, I know it. Bolstered, we redoubled our efforts. I scoured photo albums and diaries, seeking any clue that might expose Karen's secrets. The worn pages revealed little at first. It's just capturing mundane family moments, birthdays, holidays, vacations. But tucked in the back of one album, a photo fell out. My breath caught. It was Karen, kissing a man who was clearly not my father. Jenna's eyes flashed. I think we have our smoking gun. The evidence mounted as we dug deeper. A questionable money transfer here, a hidden business transaction there. Piece by piece, we uncovered Karen's lies, like lifting fog to reveal the twisted paths she had taken. Standing strong beside Jenna, I felt powerful instead of powerless for the first time in years. We would drag Karen's wrongdoings into the light, no matter what it took. I would make my family see the truth. Late one night, Jenna finally voiced what we were both realizing. Karen wanted you gone completely, Marley. With you and your father out of the picture, she planned to seize his money and disappear. Jenna clenched her fists. She almost succeeded. Cold fury coursed through me at her words. Karen had nearly stolen my whole life just to serve her greed. But I wouldn't let her win, not after coming this far. What do we do? I asked Jenna. Her eyes blazed with conviction. We're going to take our evidence to your father. He will see that the woman he loved was just an illusion, and then we will settle the score, once and for all. Jenna gripped my hands, her voice heavy with emotion. I won't let my sister's cruelty destroy your future, Marley. You deserve so much more than the wreckage she left behind. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. The pieces had finally come together, revealing the colossal web of deceit my mother had woven. She had nearly succeeded in dismantling everything that mattered to me. But her games ended here. Everything Karen had tried so hard to bury would come to light, and justice would be served. She would not control my destiny from beyond the grave. I was done being silenced and pushed aside. With Jenna by my side, I would take back my life, no matter what it cost. The time had come to punish the culprit who had delivered me such unforgivable betrayals. Karen's judgment day was coming at last, and I would relish every moment of watching her world come crashing down. The day had finally arrived. Aunt Jenna and I were ready to confront my father and finally expose the depth of my mother's lies. My heart pounded as we pulled up outside his house. Jenna gave my hand a fierce squeeze before we stepped out of the car. "Stay strong," she urged. "After today, your life will be set right again." I nodded, steeling myself as we approached the front door where so many happy memories lingered, now bittersweet. Dad opened it before we could even knock, his weary eyes widening in surprise. "Marley, what are you? How did you—" "She's here for the truth, Daniel," Jenna interjected, stepping forward. "The real truth, not the fiction Karen led you to believe." Dad blinked at her in confusion, but stepped back to let us in. My stomach was a mess of nerves and anticipation as I followed Jenna down the familiar hallway into the living room. Jenna spun to face my father, her expression fiery. "I know you believe sending Marley away was best, but Karen manipulated you like she always did." Her words cracked like a whip. "It's time you open your eyes to who she really was." "What are you talking about?" Dad asked hoarsely. By way of reply, Jenna snatched up the photo album from the coffee table and opened it to the incriminating photo of Karen kissing her lover. Dad staggered back like he'd been struck. "No," he choked out, "this can't be real." "I'm afraid it is," Jenna replied. "Karen was unfaithful for years, and it goes far deeper than that." She proceeded to lay out all that we had uncovered, the hidden accounts brimming with money, Karen's plans to abandon her family and start over. With each new revelation, Dad seemed to crumble further until finally he collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. "My God," he gasped. "How could I not have seen?" Jenna kneeled beside him, her tone softening. "She fooled us all, Daniel, but now you know her true nature." She beckoned me forward. "Karen tried to erase Marley from your lives, but she's your real family, and she needs you now more than ever." Dad raised his head, eyes shining with tears. "Marley, sweetheart." "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "Can you ever forgive me?" I rushed into his arms, hugging him fiercely as we both cried. "Of course, Dad," I said. "I just want to come home." He held me tight, shoulders shaking. "You should never have been sent away. We'll be a family again, I promise." At long last, the terrible veil over my father's eyes had been lifted. He finally saw through the intricate web of lies my mother had spun to conceal her misdeeds. Her poisoning manipulation had nearly succeeded in separating us forever. But today, justice had prevailed. I had reclaimed my place in my family, the place Karen tried so viciously to deny me. No matter what she had schemed and plotted, I had emerged triumphant, tearing down the facade of her betrayal. The girl Karen had coldly cast aside so long ago had now brought her duplicity screeching into the light. Whatever came next for our family, we would face it together, without the sinister cloud of Karen's deceit hanging over us. In the weeks after that emotional confrontation, Dad and I slowly patched our broken family back together. With Karen's deceit exposed, we focused on healing. Dad formally withdrew me from the boarding school, instead enrolling me in a local high school. My first day back, immersed in normal classes and chatter, felt like awakening from a long, lonely dream. After school, Aunt Jenna would often stop by with home-cooked meals that filled the house with delicious aromas and warmth. In the evenings, Dad and I played board games or watched movies, rekindling the simple connection we had lost. Bit by bit, our wounds began to mend. Laughter came more easily as we left Karen's darkness behind. Ahead lay a future bound with trust and light. But while Karen was gone, the damage she had inflicted lingered. We soon faced difficult decisions about how to seek justice posthumously. With Jenna's help, Dad initiated legal proceedings to seize the accounts and assets Karen had hidden away. Stripping her estate of those ill-gotten funds could never undo the pain she'd caused. But it was a start. As we sat together signing the paperwork, Dad squeezed my hand. "This is for you, sweetheart," he said quietly. "For the childhood she tried to steal from you." I blinked back tears and nodded. This act offered some balm to the ache of rejection Karen's spiteful revelations had left. With the legal actions underway, we also had to contend with the social fallout of her deceit. Dad issued a simple statement exposing her infidelity and betrayal to our wider family and community. The truth rippled out, casting Karen's memory in a sinister new light. Former friends and neighbors looked at Dad and I with pity rather than the judgment or blame I'd feared. Slowly, the broken shards of our lives were being glued back together. Scars would remain, but they were scars we now carried together, rather than alone. On the anniversary of the confrontation, Dad suggested a small ceremony, to honor the closure this brought and set intentions for the future, he explained. I readily agreed, moved by the symbolism. We stood before Karen's grave on a brisk autumn day, leaves crunching underfoot. Dad spoke a few solemn words about pain and reconciliation. Then he turned to me. "Do you want to say anything?" I stepped forward, remembering again that biting winter day when Karen had first hissed those poisonous words. "You tried to destroy this family," I said quietly. "But in the end, we survived. Your hatred only made us stronger." I squeezed my eyes shut, recalling the years lost to her manipulation and cruelty. Then I opened them, gazing ahead at the hopeful horizon stretching before me and Dad. "Goodbye, Karen," I whispered. "Your hold on us ends today." Leaving the cemetery, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The quest for justice I'd once burned for no longer consumed me. In its place flowered something sweeter, hope for the days yet to come. Karen had sought to control my fate, but her plan had failed. The truth had not destroyed us, but instead freed us to reconnect as a family. Walking hand in hand with Dad that day, I let go of the last faint shadow Karen's memory still cast. Her time was past. Ahead lay the future I would shape myself, filled with light.